The mechanic's hands were covered in grease when the knock came, soft at first, then desperate. Caleb Hayes opened the door to find a shivering stranger on his porch, mascara streaked down her pale face, designer dress soaked through by the storm. She didn't ask for shelter. She didn't explain. She just stood there, trembling, abandoned on a road that led nowhere. And when he stepped aside to let her in, neither of them knew that one act of kindness would unravel everything they thought they understood about safety, belonging, and the walls people build around broken hearts. If you want to see how far a single choice can travel, how one stormy night can reshape two lives, stay with me until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see just how far this story reaches. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight. It wasn't the gentle Oregon drizzle that locals shrugged off without umbrellas. This was something heavier, angrier, sheets of water hammering the roof of the small, weathered house on Miller Road like fists demanding entry. The kind of storm that made the forest close in, that turned the gravel driveway into a creek, that reminded anyone paying attention just how alone they really were out here on the outskirts of Eugene. Caleb Hayes stood in his garage, the yellow work light casting harsh shadows across the disassembled engine spread before him on the workbench. His hands moved with practiced precision, threading a bolt through a mounting bracket on the rebuilt carburetor. The 1979 Ford F-150 sat behind him, half restored, still wearing its original faded blue paint and patches of primer where his father had started bodywork he'd never finished. 6 years. 6 years since the accident. 6 years since Caleb had inherited the truck, the house, and a silence so complete it sometimes felt like drowning. "Daddy?" He turned to find Emma standing in the doorway that connected the garage to the kitchen, her small frame backlit by the warm glow from inside. She was clutching her stuffed rabbit, the one with the missing eye that she refused to let him replace. "Can't sleep, Sweet Pea. The thunder's too loud." She was 7, old enough to be brave about most things, but storms still got to her. They got to him too, if he was honest. Caleb wiped his hands on a rag and crossed to her, kneeling down so they were eye level. "Tell you what, how about we make some hot chocolate and I'll read you another chapter of that dragon book?" Emma's face brightened. "With the little marshmallows? Is there any other kind?" He scooped her up, felt her small arms wrap around his neck, and carried her back into the kitchen. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living room with worn furniture and walls that needed paint. It was nothing like the sprawling farmhouse he'd grown up in before his parents downsized, nothing like the life he'd imagined he'd be living at 32. But it was theirs, and most days, that was enough. He set Emma down at the kitchen table and moved to the stove, pulling out the milk and cocoa powder. Through the window above the sink, he could see nothing but darkness and rain, the nearest neighbor's lights invisible through the downpour and distance. Out here, you learned to be self-sufficient. Out here, you learned that help wasn't coming unless you called for it, and even then it might take a while. The kettle was just beginning to whistle when the knock came. Caleb froze, his hand suspended over the stove. Emma looked up from her rabbit, eyes wide. Nobody came out here. Not at night. Not in weather like this. The knock came again, harder this time, more urgent. Not the confident rap of someone who knew they were welcome, but the desperate sound of someone who had nowhere else to go. "Stay here," Caleb said quietly, moving toward the front door. He grabbed the flashlight from the hall table, his mind already running through possibilities. Someone's car broke down. Someone took a wrong turn. Someone needed help. He flicked on the porch light and opened the door. The woman standing on his porch looked like she'd walked out of a magazine and straight into a nightmare. Even drenched, even shivering, her clothes screamed money. A cocktail dress in midnight blue that probably cost more than his mortgage payment, now plastered to her thin frame by the rain. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes around her face, and her makeup had run in dark streaks down her cheeks. She wore no coat. Her heels were muddied, and her eyes, wide and dark and stunned, fixed on him with something that looked like surprise at finding anyone at all. Her voice cracked. She swallowed, tried again. "I'm sorry, I didn't know where else to go." Caleb stood there for a heartbeat, taking in the scene. No car in the driveway. No lights approaching on the road. Just this woman, alone, soaked to the bone in a storm that could kill someone in the wrong conditions. What happened? She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. There was a car. They just left me here. I saw your light, and I... Her voice broke entirely then, and she looked away, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. Caleb didn't think. Thinking would have raised too many questions, would have reminded him of all the reasons to be cautious with strangers, would have dragged up every warning his father had ever given him about getting involved in other people's problems. He just stepped aside. Come in, you're freezing. She hesitated as if kindness itself was something to be wary of. Then she crossed the threshold, dripping onto the worn welcome mat, her whole body trembling. Daddy? Emma's voice came from the kitchen, uncertain. It's okay, sweet pea. Caleb closed the door against the storm and turned to the woman. Wait here. I'll get you a towel. He moved quickly to the bathroom, grabbing the largest, warmest towel he could find. When he returned, the woman was still standing exactly where he'd left her, as if afraid to move deeper into the house without permission. Emma had appeared in the kitchen doorway, rabbit clutched tight, studying their unexpected guest with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. Caleb handed over the towel. Bathroom's through there if you want to dry off properly. I can make coffee. Or hot chocolate. We were just making some. I don't want to impose, but even as she said it, she was wrapping the towel around her shoulders, desperate for warmth. You already knocked on the door in a thunderstorm. Might as well accept the hot chocolate. He kept his tone light, non-threatening. I'm Caleb. That's Emma. The woman managed a small, shaky smile. Clara Bennett. Well, Clara Bennett, welcome to the most exciting thing to happen on Miller Road in about 6 months. Caleb moved back to the kitchen, lowering the flame under the kettle. You want to tell me why someone left you on the side of a back road in the middle of a storm? Clara followed slowly, still wrapped in the towel, still looking like she might bolt at any moment. She glanced at Emma, then back at Caleb, weighing something in her mind. Bad date, she said finally. Really bad date. He got angry when I said I wanted to go home, so he pulled over and told me to get out. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Guess he figured I'd change my mind when I realized how far we were from town. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. You got a phone? Someone you can call? Dead battery. Clara pulled a sleek smartphone from somewhere in her dress, showed him the black screen. And even if it worked, I don't know where I am. I've been walking for maybe 20 minutes before I saw your light. 20 minutes in this weather. She was lucky she'd found the house at all. Another few miles, and there was nothing but forest and darkness. Emma crept closer, examining Clara with the frank assessment children specialized in. Your dress is pretty, even though it's wet. Clara looked down at herself, at the expensive ruin of her outfit, and something cracked in her expression, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Thank you. It was prettier about an hour ago. You can sit down, Caleb said, gesturing to the kitchen table. I'll get you that hot chocolate. And maybe some dry clothes if you want them. Might be a bit big, but better than freezing. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. He met her eyes, saw the pride warring with desperation there, and gentled his tone. Look, it's just hot chocolate and an old sweatshirt. Not exactly a marriage proposal. That got a real smile, small but genuine. Clara sank into one of the kitchen chairs, tucked her wet hair behind her ear. Just the hot chocolate, then. I'll manage with the towel. Caleb poured 3 mugs, added the miniature marshmallows that made Emma grin, and set them on the table. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller with 3 people in it, the storm outside making the warm interior seem like a bubble of safety carved out of the darkness. So, Clara said, wrapping her hands around the mug like it was a lifeline, do you make a habit of rescuing women from thunderstorms, or am I special? You're the first one this year, Caleb said, settling into the chair across from her. Last year was quiet. Year before that, Mrs. Henderson's cat got stuck in my barn, so I guess that counts. Emma giggled. Mr. Whiskers, he scratched Daddy. Scars of honor, Caleb said solemnly, which made Emma giggle harder. Clara watched them, something shifting in her expression, a softness that hadn't been there before. How old are you, Emma? 7.5? The half is important. Very important, Clara agreed seriously. Never skip the half. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping hot chocolate while the rain hammered against the windows. Caleb studied Clara when she wasn't looking, The elegant bones of her face, the way she held herself even in distress, the designer watch on her wrist that probably cost more than his truck. She didn't belong here in this small kitchen with its chipped linoleum and secondhand appliances, but there was something in her eyes that suggested maybe she didn't quite belong anywhere. "I should call the police," Caleb said finally. "Report what happened. Guys shouldn't get away with that." Clara's expression shuddered immediately. "No, please, I just want to forget tonight happened. He left you in the middle of nowhere in a storm. And I'm fine now. I'm safe." She gripped the mug tighter. "Please, no police. It'll just make things complicated." There was a story there, Caleb could tell. Something beyond a bad date. But he'd learned over the years that you couldn't force people to share what they weren't ready to give. "Okay," he said slowly, "but at least let me charge your phone, and when the rain lets up, I'll drive you wherever you need to go." Relief flooded Clara's face. "Thank you, really. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't seen your light." "Probably would have made it to the next house," Caleb said, "but might have taken a while. Not a lot out here." "I like the quiet," Clara said, surprising him. She glanced around the kitchen, at the crayon drawing stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, at the stack of library books on the counter, at the simple ordinariness of it all. "It's peaceful." "Peaceful's one word for it," Caleb said. "Lonely's another." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Too honest, too revealing. Emma was focused on fishing marshmallows out of her mug, not listening. But Clara heard. She looked at him, really looked at him, and in her eyes he saw recognition, the kind that comes when one lonely person spots another. "Yeah," she said softly. "I know that word too." The moment stretched between them, fragile and unexpected. Then Emma yawned hugely, breaking the spell, and Caleb stood. "All right, sweet pea. Time for bed, storm or no storm." "But you said you'd read to me," Emma protested, though her eyes were already drooping. "I will. Go brush your teeth and I'll be right there." Emma slid off her chair, paused by Clara. "Are you going to stay?" Clara blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, I don't—" "Just until the storm stops," Caleb cut in gently. "Then I'll make sure Clara gets home safe." "Okay." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She padded off toward the bathroom, Rabbit trailing behind her. Clara watched her go, something wistful crossing her face. "She's sweet." "She's the best thing I ever did," Caleb said simply. "Her mom—" He paused, deciding how much to share. "She left when Emma was 2, decided small-town life wasn't for her. Haven't heard from her since." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We're doing fine. Better than fine." He started gathering the mugs. "You want more chocolate while I read to her? Or there's coffee if you prefer." "No, I'm good." Clara stood, the towel still wrapped around her shoulders. Would you mind if I sat in your living room just while you read to her? I promise I won't steal anything." She said it like a joke, but there was real vulnerability underneath, a fear of being too much trouble, of overstaying a welcome that had barely been extended. "Help yourself," Caleb said. "Not much to steal anyway, unless you're really into 6-year-old mechanics manuals." That earned him another smile. Clara moved into the living room, settled onto the worn couch like she was afraid it might break under her slight weight. Caleb watched her for a moment. This strange, elegant woman who'd appeared out of the storm, then headed to Emma's room. He read 3 chapters instead of 1, partly because Emma kept asking for more, partly because he was in no hurry to return to the awkward dance of hosting a stranger. By the time he finished, Emma was asleep, one small hand curled around her rabbit, her breathing deep and even. Caleb tucked the blanket around her, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and stepped quietly out of the room. The living room was dim, lit only by the single lamp in the corner. Clara had pulled her feet up onto the couch, was staring at the rain-streaked window with an expression of such profound exhaustion that Caleb almost didn't want to disturb her. "Hey," he said softly, "want me to check on your phone?" She turned to him, and for a moment she looked lost. "Yes, please." He found her phone where she'd left it on the kitchen counter, plugged it into his charger. It took a moment, but the screen flickered to life, showing a dozen missed calls and twice as many texts. "Looks like someone's worried about you," he said, carrying it back to her. Clara glanced at the screen and her expression went flat. Not worried, angry. She swiped through the notifications with mechanical efficiency, her face giving nothing away. My father. He found out I went out tonight, found out who I was with. The guy who left you in the rain? Marcus Vance, son of one of my father's business partners. Clara's voice was bitter now, the careful polish cracking. Apparently I was supposed to be grateful for his attention, supposed to smile and nod and let him paw at me like I was part of some corporate merger. Caleb sat down in the armchair across from her, giving her space but staying close enough to listen. Your dad sounds like a piece of work. My father is Richard Bennett, Bennett Holdings. Maybe you've heard of it. She said it without pride, just a flat statement of fact. Caleb had heard of it. Everyone in Oregon had heard of Bennett Holdings, real estate development, tech investments, the kind of money that bought senators and shaped city skylines. He looked at Clara with new eyes, understanding now why she'd been so afraid of calling the police, why her dress cost a fortune, why she carried herself like someone who'd been trained to never show weakness. So you're rich, he said finally. My father's rich. I'm just... She gestured vaguely at herself. This, whatever this is a person who got left in a storm and walked to safety, Caleb said firmly. That takes guts. Money's got nothing to do with it. Clara looked at him like he'd said something in a foreign language, like kindness without agenda was something she'd forgotten existed. I should call a car, she said quietly. Get out of your way. Storm's not done yet. Caleb nodded toward the window where rain still pounded. And you're not in my way. If you want to wait it out, there's no rush. Why are you being so nice to me? The question came out raw, unguarded. You don't know me. I could be anyone. You could be, Caleb agreed. But you're also someone who needed help, and I had a door to open. Doesn't seem that complicated. Clara shook her head slowly, something like wonder in her expression. You have no idea how rare that is. Real help. No strings attached. Maybe in your world. Out here, we look out for each other. Not because we expect something back, because that's just what you do. They sat in silence for a while, the rain a steady percussion on the roof. Clara kept glancing around the room, at the photos on the wall of Emma at various ages, at the stack of engine parts in the corner that Caleb kept meaning to organize, at the simple, worn comfort of a life built on necessity rather than luxury. It's nice here, she said finally. Quiet. Real. It's small, Caleb corrected, and the roof leaks when it rains hard enough, and the heating's temperamental in winter, but yeah, it's home. I live in a penthouse in Portland, Claire said. 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, a kitchen I never cook in because there's a restaurant downstairs. She pulled the towel tighter around herself. I can't remember the last time I felt at home there. What do you do? Caleb asked. Besides dodge bad dates with your father's business partners? I'm an artist. Painter, mostly. Some sculpture. She said it defensively, like she expected him to laugh. I'm getting my MFA at PSU. My father thinks it's a waste of time and money, but he pays for it anyway because it looks good to his friends. Bennett's daughter, the creative one. You any good? The question surprised her. Yes, I think so. I mean, my professors say... She stopped, laughed at herself. Yes, I'm good. I work hard at it. Then it's not a waste, Caleb said simply. Doing something you're good at, something you care about, that's the opposite of a waste. Clara stared at him, and something shifted in her face. The careful mask she'd been wearing, the one that probably helped her survive in her father's world, began to slip. Who are you? She asked quietly. Really? Caleb Hayes, single dad, mechanic. I fix cars for Donnelly's Auto in town, and I restore old trucks on the weekends. I read fantasy novels to my daughter, and I make hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows. That's pretty much the whole story. No, Clara said. It's not. There's more, I can tell. She was right, of course. There was more. His parents' death, the years of grief and adjustment, the loneliness of raising Emma alone, the dreams he'd set aside to build the life they needed. But those stories were heavy, and the night already felt weighted with enough rain and revelation. Maybe, he said, but those parts take longer than one night to tell. Clara nodded slowly, accepting this. What about the truck in your garage, the blue one? That was my dad's. We were restoring it together before he died. Car accident 6 years ago. My mom, too. Caleb kept his voice steady, practiced at this particular pain. I've been finishing the work ever since. Almost done. Just needs a few more parts and some bodywork. I'm sorry about your parents. Thanks. He met her eyes. Grief's weird. Some days it's this huge thing that fills up the whole world. Other days it's just background noise. You learn to live with it. Do you? Clara asked. Learn to live with it? Eventually. Not the way you expect, not the way you think you should. But you find a way through. He paused. You lose someone? Not like that. But I lost the idea of who I thought my family was supposed to be, who I was supposed to be. She looked down at her hands. My mother died when I was 16, cancer. After that, my father just hardened, turned everything into business, including me. That why you ran tonight? I didn't run. I just refused to play along. Clara's voice gained an edge. Marcus got aggressive, said I was being ungrateful, that I should know how lucky I was that he was interested. When I told him to take me home, he got angry, said I needed to learn some manners, and then he just pulled over and told me to get out. Caleb felt anger kindle in his chest, the protective kind that made him want to find Marcus Vance and teach him about real manners. But he kept his voice calm. You did the right thing, walking away. Did I? Look where it got me. But Clara was almost smiling now, the irony not lost on her. Soaking wet in a stranger's kitchen, it could be worse places to end up. Yeah, Clara said softly, looking around the small, warm room. It really could. The rain began to ease outside, the downpour gentling into a steady drizzle. Clara noticed, checked her phone again. The missed calls had stopped, but the texts continued. Her father demanding answers, demanding she come home, demanding she stop embarrassing the family. I should go, she said, without moving. I've imposed enough. Where's home? Portland? Yeah, downtown. That's over 2 hours. Roads are going to be a mess after this rain. Caleb made a decision, one that would probably seem crazy in the morning, but felt right now. Look, it's late. Emma's asleep. You've been through hell tonight. Why don't you stay? I've got a couch that's more comfortable than it looks. In the morning, when the roads are better, I'll drive you to the bus station in Eugene, or wherever you need to go. Clara opened her mouth to protest, but something in Caleb's expression stopped her. Maybe it was the genuine concern there, the complete absence of ulterior motive. Maybe it was just exhaustion winning over pride. Okay, she said finally. Thank you for everything. I'll sleep on the couch. Caleb brought her a pillow and a blanket, found an old t-shirt and sweatpants that would be too big, but at least dry. Clara changed in the bathroom, emerged looking younger and more vulnerable in his oversized clothes, her wet dress draped over the shower rod to dry. Tomorrow's Saturday, Caleb said as he turned off the kitchen light. So there's no rush in the morning. Sleep as long as you need. What about you? Clara asked. Don't you have work? Saturdays are my day with Emma. We usually just hang around, maybe go to the library. Nothing that can't adjust. He paused in the doorway to his bedroom. There's cereal in this cabinet. If you wake up hungry, help yourself to anything. Caleb? Clara's voice stopped him. Why are you doing this? Really? He thought about it, about the real answer beneath the easy ones. Because 6 years ago, when my parents died, I was drowning, and people showed up, neighbors I barely knew, friends of my dad's, even strangers who'd just heard what happened. They brought food and took care of Emma and made sure I remembered to eat and sleep. They didn't ask for anything, they just showed up. He met her eyes across the dim room. I guess I'm just returning the favor, passing it forward. Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. The world needs more people like you. The world needs more people showing up for each other, Caleb corrected gently. That's all this is. He left her there, settled on his couch with his blanket, her phone charging on the side table. In his room, he lay in bed listening to the rain diminish to a whisper, thinking about the strange turn the night had taken. This time tomorrow, Clara Bennett would be back in her world and he'd be back in his. And probably they'd never see each other again. The thought bothered him more than it should have, but he pushed it aside, closed his eyes, and let the sound of the rain pull him towards sleep. In the living room, Clara lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling of a stranger's house that somehow felt safer than her expensive apartment ever had. She thought about Marcus's anger, her father's controlling texts, the life that was waiting for her back in Portland, the life she'd been trying to escape without quite admitting it to herself. And she thought about Caleb Hayes with his kind eyes and calloused hands, who'd opened his door to a stranger without hesitation, who'd offered warmth and shelter and hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows, who'd seen her at her worst and treated her with dignity anyway. In her world, everything came with strings attached. Every kindness had a price. Every relationship was a transaction. But here, in this small house on the edge of nowhere, someone had helped her simply because she needed help. It was such a small thing, such a basic thing. So why did it feel like the rarest gift she'd ever received? Clara pulled the blanket up to her chin, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. The creak of old wood, the whisper of rain, the distant hum of the refrigerator. Somewhere down the hall, Emma and Caleb slept, safe in their small world. And for the first time in years, Clara felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been wound too tight for too long. She felt, for just this moment, like she could breathe. Like maybe there were still good people in the world. Like maybe, just maybe, there were places where kindness still existed without agenda. The thought followed her into sleep, a small ember of warmth against the cold that had settled into her bones years ago. And in the morning, when she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of a little girl's laughter, that ember would still be there, waiting to catch fire. Morning came soft and golden, the storm's fury spent. Caleb woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the sound of voices in the kitchen, one high and animated, one low and uncertain. For a disoriented moment, he thought he was dreaming. Then memory snapped into place and he sat up, running a hand through his hair. Clara was still here. He pulled on jeans and a clean shirt, followed the smell of coffee to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas, chattering away while Clara stood at the stove, his two large sweatpants rolled at the waist, her dark hair pulled into a messy knot. And then the dragon said he was sorry, but he still had to guard the treasure because that was his job, Emma was explaining, with the serious intensity of a child telling an important story. But the princess said maybe they could share the treasure and both be happy. That sounds like a very smart princess, Clara said, flipping what appeared to be pancakes with more confidence than Caleb would have expected from someone who claimed never to use her kitchen. Daddy says the best stories are the ones where people figure out how to share instead of fight. Your daddy sounds wise. Clara glanced up, saw Caleb in the doorway, and something almost like guilt flashed across her face. I hope you don't mind. Emma said you usually make pancakes on Saturday, and I found the mix in the cabinet. I don't mind. Caleb moved to the coffee pot, poured himself a cup. Didn't know you could cook. I can't, really, but pancakes are hard to mess up. She slid one onto a plate, examined it critically. Mostly. The pancake was slightly lopsided, one edge darker than the other, but Emma accepted it with enthusiasm, drowning it in syrup. Caleb took the spatula from Clara, their fingers brushing briefly, and he felt her stiffen at the contact before deliberately relaxing. Go sit, he said. You're the guest. I'll finish these. I don't mind helping. I know, but sit anyway. Clara obeyed, settling into the chair across from Emma with a cup of coffee wrapped in both hands. She was watching Emma with that same wistful expression from the night before, like she was studying something rare and precious that she'd never quite learned to hold. They ate breakfast in comfortable quiet, Emma filling the silences with running commentary about everything from the rain puddles in the yard to the family of deer that sometimes came to eat from the apple tree. Clara listened with genuine attention, asking questions, laughing at Emma's dramatic retellings. Caleb found himself watching them both. His daughter, so easy with strangers, so hungry for connection in their isolated life, and Clara, who seemed to be remembering something she'd forgotten. How to be present. How to simply exist without performance. When the plates were cleared and Emma had gone to get dressed, Clara stood at the sink, washing dishes despite Caleb's protests. I should call that car now, she said, not looking at him. Get out of your hair. You're not in my hair. You've been more than kind, but I'm sure you have things to do today. Caleb dried a plate, set it in the rack. Emma and I usually go to the library on Saturdays, then maybe the park if the weather's nice. Nothing that requires privacy. Clara scrubbed at a pan that was already clean. Your life is so simple. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it's intentional. Everything serves a purpose. Everything connects. Didn't used to be that way. Caleb took the pan from her, dried it. After my parents died, everything was chaos for a long time. Emma was barely 2. I was drowning in grief. The bills kept coming, and I had no idea how to do any of it alone. Took me almost a year to find a rhythm, to figure out what mattered and what was just noise. What matters? Clara asked quietly. Emma. Making sure she feels safe and loved. Work that puts food on the table and doesn't eat my soul. Small moments of joy when we can find them. He shrugged. Not complicated, just consistent. I don't have anything consistent, Clara said, except my father's disappointment and my own feeling that I'm failing at a life I never wanted in the first place. Before Caleb could respond, Emma bounced back into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and a shirt with a dragon on it. Can Clara come to the library with us? Clara's eyes widened. Oh, sweetie, I don't think... Please, you could help me pick books. Daddy always picks the boring ones. Hey now, Caleb protested mildly. Those history books are educational. They're boring, Emma insisted, looking at Clara with pleading eyes. You're an artist. Artists know about good stories, right? Clara looked helplessly at Caleb, clearly torn between not wanting to intrude and not wanting to disappoint a 7-year-old. It's up to you, Caleb said. But if you want to come, you're welcome. Fair warning, though. Our library is small, and Mrs. Chen, who runs it, talks a lot. I haven't been to a library in years, Clara said slowly. I just buy books online when I need them. Emma's face showed pure confusion. But libraries are free, and they smell good, and Mrs. Chen gives out cookies. Cookies? Clara's lips twitched. Well, that does sound compelling. Is that a yes? Emma was practically vibrating with hope. Clara looked at Caleb one more time, and he saw the question in her eyes. Not permission exactly, but something like it. Reassurance that this was okay, that she wouldn't be disrupting something sacred. He nodded slightly, and something in her expression eased. Yes, Clara said to Emma. If your dad doesn't mind, I'd love to come. Emma's whoop of joy probably woke the neighbors half a mile away. An hour later, they were climbing into Caleb's truck. Not the restored F-150, but his daily driver, a newer Chevy that had seen better days but ran solid. Clara's dress from the night before hung in a garment bag in the back, still damp but saved. She'd borrowed more of Caleb's clothes, a flannel shirt over the t-shirt, jeans that she'd had to belt tight and roll up at the ankles. I look ridiculous, she'd said, examining herself in the bathroom mirror. You look comfortable, Caleb had countered, and the surprise on her face suggested that might not be something she experienced often. The drive into Eugene took 20 minutes, the roads still wet but clear. Emma kept up a steady stream of chatter from the back seat, pointing out landmarks and telling Clara the elaborate backstories she'd invented for various houses they passed. That one with the blue shutters? That's where the witch lives. But she's a good witch. She turns mean people into toads, but only temporarily. Temporarily toads, Claire repeated, her voice rich with amusement. That seems fair. Emma's got strong opinions about justice, Caleb said. Justice is important, Emma declared. You can't just let people be mean and not have consequences. Clara's expression shifted, something dark passing through her eyes. No, she said quietly, you really can't. The library was a modest brick building on the edge of downtown, surrounded by oak trees that had dropped acorns all over the parking lot. Inside, it smelled exactly like Emma had promised. Old paper, furniture polish, and possibility. Mrs. Chen looked up from the circulation desk, her face breaking into a warm smile when she saw Emma. Then her gaze shifted to Clara, and her eyebrows rose with undisguised curiosity. Caleb Hayes, are you going to introduce me to your friend? This is Clara, Caleb said, deliberately not adding a last name. She's visiting from Portland. Portland? Mrs. Chen's eyes lit up. What brings you all the way out here? Clara glanced at Caleb, a silent question. He gave the smallest shrug, your story to tell however you want. Just needed a change of scenery, Clara said smoothly. Caleb's been kind enough to show me around. Well, any friend of Caleb's is welcome here. We may not be fancy, but we've got character. Mrs. Chen reached under the desk, produced a tin of homemade cookies. Emma, honey, I made those lemon ones you like. Emma practically levitated with joy. Clara watched the easy warmth of the exchange, the way Mrs. Chen knew exactly which cookies to offer, the way Caleb thanked her with genuine affection. This was community, Clara realized. Not the transactional networking of her father's world, but real connection built over time and small kindnesses. They wandered into the stacks, Emma leading the way with the confidence of someone who knew every shelf. She pulled Clara toward the children's section, immediately beginning to narrate the merits and flaws of various books. This one has a good dragon, but the illustrations are weird. This one made me cry, but in a good way. This one Daddy said was too scary, but I read it anyway and it was fine. Sounds like you know your own mind, Clara said, kneeling down to examine the books Emma was piling into her arms. Daddy says it's good to know what you like and don't like. He says too many people pretend to like things just because other people do. Clara went very still. Your daddy is a very smart man. I know, Emma said matter-of-factly. He knows lots of things. He can fix any car, and he makes the best grilled cheese, and he gives the best hugs when you're sad. What about when you're happy? Clara asked softly. Those are good too, but the sad ones are better because they make you feel safe. Caleb had drifted toward the mechanics section, giving them space, but Clara's words carried to him anyway. Do you feel safe a lot, Emma? Every day? Daddy says our job is to make a safe place for each other, so even when the world is scary, we have somewhere to be okay. Clara's breath caught. Caleb heard it from 2 aisles away, heard the small fracture in her composure. He started to move toward them, but Clara had already pulled herself together, was helping Emma sort through the stack of books with steady hands. They spent an hour in the library. Emma checked out 6 books, the maximum allowed. Clara found herself drawn to the art section, pulling down volumes on contemporary painters and regional artists. Caleb watched her flip through a book on Pacific Northwest landscape painters, saw something hungry and wistful in her expression. You should get it, he said quietly, appearing beside her. I don't have a library card here. Use mine. That's not... Emma only used 2 of my 6 slots, and I'm not going to read a book on landscape painting techniques. He met her eyes. But I think you might want to. Clara looked at the book, then at him, then back at the book. Okay, she said finally. Thank you. At the circulation desk, Mrs. Chen processed their books with knowing eyes that saw far too much. When she handed Clara the painting book, she patted her hand. Art's good for the soul, dear. We don't get enough people appreciating beautiful things anymore. No, Clara agreed softly. We don't. Outside, the day had turned genuinely beautiful. The storm-washed sky, brilliant blue, the air crisp and clean. Emma immediately made a case for the park, and neither adult had the heart to refuse her. The playground was small and slightly worn, but Emma didn't care. She attacked the monkey bars with fierce determination, while Caleb and Clara settled onto a bench nearby. She's wonderful, Clara said, watching Emma swing from bar to bar. You've done an incredible job with her. She makes it easy. Even when it's hard, if that makes sense. It does. Clara pulled her borrowed flannel tighter, though the air wasn't cold. Can I ask you something personal? You showed up soaking wet at my door and slept on my couch. I think we're past worrying about personal. That earned a small smile. Fair point. Do you ever regret it? Taking on a child alone? Not having, a partner to share it with? Caleb watched Emma drop from the bars, race toward the slide. Sometimes I miss having someone to talk to at the end of the day. Someone who gets the whole story, not just the parts you can tell a 7-year-old. But regret, Emma? Never. Not once. He turned to Clara. Why? You thinking about kids? God, no. I can barely manage my own life. But there was something wistful in her voice. I watch you two together, and it's so clear what matters to you. What you've built your whole life around. I don't have that. I have expensive hobbies my father tolerates, and a degree I'm pursuing because it's the one thing he can't control. She paused. I don't know what I'd fight for. Not really. Maybe you just haven't found it yet. Or maybe I'm too afraid to look. Before Caleb could respond, Emma came running over, face flushed with exertion. Daddy, can we get ice cream? Please, Clara hasn't tried minis yet, and everyone should try minis. Caleb checked his watch. Nearly noon. What do you say, Clara? You up for what Emma claims is the best ice cream in Oregon? Bold claim, Clara said, but she was smiling. I should probably verify it personally. Minnie's ice cream was 3 blocks from the park, a tiny shop that had been there for 40 years and looked it. The owner, Minnie herself, was a woman in her 70s with steel gray hair and opinions about everything. Caleb Hayes, she said when they walked in. Haven't seen you in 2 weeks. I was starting to think you'd found another ice cream shop. You know you're the only one for us, Minnie. Flattery. I like it. Her sharp eyes moved to Clara. New friend? Clara, Caleb said simply. From Portland, by the look of those clothes, though I'm guessing they're borrowed. Nothing got past Minnie. What's your flavor, Portland, Clara? Clara scanned the menu, clearly overwhelmed by the array of options. What do you recommend? Depends. You a safe player or a risk taker? Lately? Clara's voice was wry. I'm trying to figure that out. Then try the lavender honey. Either you'll love it or hate it, but at least you'll know. Clara ordered it. Caleb got his usual chocolate peanut butter. Emma, after much deliberation, chose strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. They sat at one of the small tables by the window, and Caleb watched Clara take her first cautious bite. Her eyes widened. Oh, that's actually incredible. Minnie doesn't mess around, Caleb said. I can't remember the last time I had ice cream. Clara took another bite, this one less cautious. My father has very strong opinions about sugar and discipline. Your father has strong opinions about a lot of things, Caleb observed carefully. You have no idea. Clara's phone, which had been mercifully quiet all morning, suddenly buzzed with a series of rapid-fire texts. She glanced at the screen and her expression shuddered. Speak of the devil. He's still looking for you? He's not looking. He knows exactly where I am. Or at least, he knows I'm somewhere in Eugene because my phone pinged a cell tower. She set the phone face down on the table. He wants me to come home immediately. Says we need to have a serious conversation about my choices. You going to go? Clara stared at her melting ice cream. Eventually. I have to. My apartment, my car, my credit cards, they're all his. He made sure of that. Made sure I'd always have to come back. That's not right, Emma said suddenly, her child's sense of justice flaring. You should get to choose where you go. Out of the mouths of babes, Clara murmured. She looked at Emma with something like gratitude. You're absolutely right. I should. They finished their ice cream in contemplative silence. When they stepped back outside, the day felt heavier despite the sunshine. Clara checked her phone again, and Caleb saw her shoulders tense. I should probably call that car now, she said. I've taken up your whole day. No, you haven't, Emma protested. We still have the whole afternoon. Right, Daddy? Caleb looked at Clara, saw the war playing out behind her eyes, the pull of obligation against the desperate desire to stay in this small, uncomplicated world just a little longer. Emma's right, he said quietly. If you don't have to rush back, you're welcome to stay. We were just going to go home, maybe work on the truck a bit. Nothing exciting. Could I watch? Clara asked suddenly. You work on the truck? I've never seen anyone restore a car before. It's pretty boring. Lots of waiting for paint to dry and arguing with rusty bolts. Still, I'd like to see it. If you don't mind. Caleb didn't mind. Somehow, despite every logical reason he should be eager to return to his normal routine, he found himself hoping she'd stay. Sure, he said. Come on. They drove back to the house, Emma chattering about her new books, Clara quiet in the passenger seat. When they pulled into the driveway, she stared at the weathered house like she was trying to memorize it. Inside, Caleb changed into work clothes while Emma settled on the living room floor with her library books. Clara wandered into the garage, where the F-150 sat waiting, patient and half-finished. Caleb found her running her hand along the truck's fender, tracing the line where original paint met fresh primer. My dad started this when I was in high school, he said, opening his toolbox. We'd spend weekends out here, just working on it together. He'd tell stories about when he first bought it, all the places he drove. Said when we finished it, we'd take a road trip, just the two of us. I'm sorry you didn't get to finish it with him. Me too, but I'm finishing it anyway. Feels like keeping a promise, you know? Clara nodded slowly. I used to paint with my mother. She wasn't an artist, but she loved art. She'd take me to galleries when I was little, let me run around the sculpture gardens. After she died, my father boxed up all her art books, said dwelling on the past wasn't productive. When's the last time you unpacked them? I haven't. They're still in my father's basement. He'd notice if I took them. Caleb selected a wrench, moved to the engine. You're 26 years old and you need permission to take your own mother's books? It's complicated. Is it? He looked at her over the truck's hood. Or have you just been told it's complicated so many times you believe it? Clara flinched like he'd struck her. Then, slowly, something shifted in her expression, a crack in the careful facade she wore. I don't know anymore, she whispered. I don't know what's real control and what I've just accepted because it's easier than fighting. Fighting's hard, Caleb said gently, especially when you're fighting alone. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Caleb explaining what he was doing as he went, Clara asking occasional questions. She had an artist's eye for detail, noticed the care he took with each small piece, the way he cleaned and labeled everything before reassembly. You really love this, she observed. I love that it's fixable, that if I'm patient and careful enough, I can take something broken and make it whole again. He tightened a bolt, tested the connection. Not everything in life works that way, but this does. Clara picked up one of the old photographs on the workbench. Caleb and his father, both considerably younger, grinning beside the truck. You look like him. I have his hands. My mom's eyes. Caleb took the photo, studied it. Emma has her grandmother's smile. I'm glad for that. Glad she carries them forward even though she never got to know them. Do you talk to her about them? All the time. I want her to know where she comes from, to understand that she's part of a story bigger than just us. He set the photo down carefully. What about you? Do you talk about your mom? Not with my father. He acts like she never existed. Like those 16 years were just prologue to the real story of his empire building. Clara's voice was bitter. But sometimes I talk to her. In my head. When I'm painting. I tell her about colors and composition and all the things I wish she'd lived to see. I bet she hears you. You believe in that? An afterlife? I believe that love doesn't just stop because someone's heart does. Has to go somewhere. Caleb shrugged. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but it's the kind of wishful thinking that makes life bearable, so I'm keeping it. Emma appeared in his garage doorway, dragging her feet dramatically. I'm hungry. Can we have lunch? Caleb checked his watch, surprised to find it was past 1. How about we order pizza? Clara, you sticking around? Clara should have said no. Should have called that car hours ago, should have already been halfway back to Portland and the reckoning waiting there. But the word that came out of her mouth was, yes, if that's okay. Pepperoni, Emma declared, the question of Clara's presence already settled in her mind. They ordered pizza. They ate it in the living room while Emma told elaborate stories about the books she'd read. They watched an animated movie that Emma had seen 17 times and could quote verbatim. And through it all, Clara's phone kept buzzing with increasing urgency, her father's messages growing sharper, more demanding. She ignored them. When evening came soft and purple through the windows, Caleb finally said what they'd both been avoiding. You need to go home. I know. Clara didn't move from her spot on the couch. Your father's going to lose his mind if you don't. He already has. Now he's just getting creative with his threats. She finally looked at her phone, scrolled through the messages with a detached expression. Cutting off my tuition, evicting me from the apartment, reporting my car stolen. The greatest hits. Can he do that? All of it. I'm an adult, but I'm a financially dependent adult. He made sure of that. Clara set the phone down. I should have left years ago. Should have gotten a job, found my own place, built a life he couldn't control. But I was comfortable and scared, and I told myself it was easier to just endure. It's not too late, Caleb said quietly. Isn't it? I'm 26 with a half-finished degree, no work experience, and a bank account my father monitors. What am I going to do? Run away and join the circus? You could start smaller, finish your degree, get a job in your field, start saving money he doesn't know about. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm not saying it's easy, but you're smart and talented and stronger than you think you are. You walked through a storm last night. You can walk through this one too. Claire's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Why do you care? You don't even know me. Maybe not, but I know what it looks like when someone's drowning, and I know that sometimes all it takes is one person saying you can do this for it to feel possible. They sat in the gathering darkness, Emma curled up between them, half asleep, the house quiet except for the evening sounds filtering through the walls. I don't want to go back, Clara said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, but I have to. I know that too. She turned to him then, and in the dim light her face was raw and open. Can I come back? Not to stay, just to visit? On weekends, maybe? I could take the bus. I wouldn't be in the way. Caleb's heart did something complicated in his chest. You wouldn't be in the way. I need to know there's somewhere I can come where people don't want something from me. Where I can just be. She gestured helplessly. This. Whatever this is. You can come back, Caleb said. Anytime you want. Door's always open. Clara nodded, wiped at her eyes with the heel of her hand. Thank you, for today, for last night, for seeing me. You're not hard to see, Clara. You just spend a lot of time around people who aren't looking. She laughed, wet and shaky. Maybe you're right. Caleb called her a car. They waited on the porch while Emma dozed on the couch inside, and when the headlights appeared at the end of the driveway, Clara turned to him one last time. I meant it, she said. About coming back. I believe you. She hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged him, quick and tight and desperate. Caleb wrapped his arms around her, felt her shaking, and held on until she pulled away. Next Saturday? She asked. We'll be here. Clara climbed into the car, her borrowed clothes returned, her own dress in a bag beside her. Through the window, she looked small and lost and determined all at once. Caleb watched the car's taillights disappear down the road, back toward the highway, back toward Portland and everything waiting there. The porch felt emptier than it had in years. Inside, he found Emma stirring awake, blinking sleepily. Did Clara leave? Yeah, sweet pea, she had to go home. Is she coming back? Caleb thought about Clara's face, about the promise in her eyes that might hold or might dissolve under the weight of her father's pressure. I hope so, he said honestly. Me too, Emma murmured, already drifting back to sleep. I liked her. Yeah, Caleb said softly, carrying his daughter to bed. Me too. Later, alone in his room, he found himself thinking about the day, about library books and ice cream, about watching Clara discover simple joys she'd been denied, about the way she'd looked at his half-finished truck like it was the most interesting thing in the world. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Made it back. Thank you again for everything. See you next Saturday? Clara Caleb stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Doors open. Drive safe. He set the phone aside, but sleep was a long time coming, because somewhere between Friday night's storm and Saturday evening's goodbye, something had shifted in his quiet, careful world, and he wasn't sure whether to be grateful or terrified by what that might mean. The week that followed moved with strange slowness, each day stretching longer than the last. Caleb found himself checking his phone more than usual, waiting for messages that came in sporadic bursts. Clara sending photos of her paintings in progress, asking questions about Emma's favorite colors, sharing small observations about the city that felt like postcards from another world. There's a gallery opening tonight. Everyone's wearing black and talking about deconstructing the male gaze. I keep thinking about your garage and how honest everything there is. My father's barely speaking to me. Apparently disappearing for a day without explanation is theatrical and manipulative. The irony is completely lost on him. I bought art supplies today. Real ones, not the expensive, pretentious ones from the boutique near campus. The clerk looked at me like I was crazy for being excited about basic acrylics. Caleb responded when he could. Between fixing transmissions and picking Emma up from school, his replies shorter but steady. He told her about the carburetor he'd finally gotten seated properly, about Emma's new obsession with drawing dragons, about the way the October light turned everything golden just before dark. He didn't tell her that Emma asked about her every day. Didn't mention that he'd caught himself setting out 4 plates at dinner before remembering it was just the 2 of them. Didn't say that the house felt quieter than it had in years, like Clara's single day there had somehow made him aware of all the empty spaces he'd learned to ignore. Friday night, Emma was in bed and Caleb was finishing the last of the dinner dishes when his phone rang. Not a text this time, but an actual call. Clara's name on the screen. "Hey," he answered, suddenly aware of how much he'd been hoping she'd call. "Hey." Her voice sounded tight, controlled in that way that meant she was barely holding herself together. "Is the offer still good? For tomorrow?" "Course." "You okay?" A long pause. He could hear traffic in the background, the ambient noise of the city. "I had a fight with my father. A bad one. He found out I've been texting you, and he said some things. About you, about my judgment, about how I'm throwing away my future for some small-town mechanic with a kid." Well, Caleb felt the words land like punches, but kept his voice even. "What did you say?" "I told him you were a better man than anyone he'd ever introduced me to. That you'd shown me more genuine kindness in one day than I'd received from his entire social circle in 26 years. She laughed, but it was edged with something sharp. "He didn't like that much." "I'm guessing that's an understatement. He threatened to cut me off completely if I see you again. Said he's not going to bankroll my rebellion." Clara's voice cracked slightly. "So I told him to do it, cut me off. I'm done living on his leash." Caleb set down the dish he'd been drying, gripped the counter. "Clara, that's a big decision. You sure you've thought this through?" "I've thought about nothing else all week, and I keep coming back to the same thing. I'm so tired of being afraid. Of making myself smaller so I don't upset him. Of pretending the life he's designed for me is the one I want." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know what I'm doing, Caleb, but I know I can't keep doing what I've been doing." "What do you need? Can I come earlier tomorrow, like morning instead of afternoon? I need to get out of this apartment, away from his phone calls and his threats, and the way everything here reminds me that none of it's actually mine." "Come whenever you want," Caleb said. "We'll be here." "Thank you." The relief in her voice was palpable. "I'm taking the first bus out. Should be there by 9. After they hung up, Caleb stood in his kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to process what was happening. Clara was cutting ties with her father, walking away from money and security and everything she'd known. And part of her plan, apparently, involved coming here, to his small house, his simple life. Him. The weight of that responsibility settled heavy on his shoulders. Because what if he'd misread everything? What if she was romanticizing his world the way people did with things they didn't actually have to live with? What if she showed up tomorrow and realized that small-town life wasn't charming when it was permanent, that struggle wasn't noble when it was daily, that a garage and library books weren't enough to build a future on? But then he remembered the way she'd looked at Emma with such gentle wonder. The way she'd asked real questions about the truck restoration, had actually listened to his answers. The way she'd seemed to breathe easier here, like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. Maybe she was running toward something, not just away from it. He hoped so. Because the alternative, that he was a convenient escape, a temporary rebellion, that would hurt more than he wanted to admit. Saturday morning arrived cool and bright, the kind of October day that felt like a gift after weeks of rain. Caleb made pancakes while Emma bounced around the kitchen in anticipation, having extracted a promise that she could show Clara her dragon drawings the moment she arrived. "What if she doesn't come?" Emma asked suddenly, her 7-year-old certainty wavering. "She'll come," Caleb said, more confident than he felt. "But what if her dad won't let her? Her dad doesn't get to decide anymore. Clara does." Emma processed this, nodded slowly. "Good. People should get to decide for themselves." At 8:45, Caleb heard the sound of tires on gravel, and his heart kicked hard against his ribs. Through the window, he saw not a rideshare car, but an older Honda Civic, slightly dented, clearly not the luxury vehicle he'd have expected Clara to own. She climbed out wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and he was struck again by how different she looked from that first night. Less polished, more present, like she was slowly becoming solid instead of just beautiful. But it was what she pulled from the back seat that made him pause. 2 large canvas bags stuffed full, a backpack, a case that looked like it held art supplies. This wasn't a day trip. This was someone who'd packed like she might not go back. Emma burst out the front door before Caleb could stop her, launching herself at Clara with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. Clara caught her, laughing, and the sound was lighter than Caleb had heard before. "I brought my sketchbook," Emma announced. "Want to see my dragons?" "Absolutely. That's literally the thing I want most in the world right now." Caleb stepped onto the porch, helped Clara with her bags. This looks like more than a day's worth of stuff. Yeah. Clara met his eyes, and he saw nervousness there, but also determination. I was hoping maybe I could stay through Sunday, if that's okay. There's a motel in town if it's too much. Don't be ridiculous, Caleb said, picking up the canvas bags. You can have the couch again. Or actually, you should take my room. I'll take the couch. I'm not kicking you out of your own bed. You're not kicking me anywhere. I'm offering. He carried the bags inside, heard Emma already chattering away about her latest artistic endeavors. What happened, Clara? After we talked last night? She set down the art supply case with careful precision, like it held something precious. I started packing. Just a few things at first, clothes, toiletries, my materials, and then I couldn't stop. I kept thinking about what I'd actually miss from that apartment if I never went back, and the list was so short it was almost funny. She gestured at the bags. This is it. This is everything that actually matters to me. Your father know you left? I left him a note, very civilized, just said I needed space to think and I'd be in touch when I was ready. Her smile was sharp. He's called 17 times since 6 this morning. I stopped answering after the 5th voicemail threatened legal action. Legal action for what? The car. It's technically his, registered in his name, even though he gave it to me for my 21st birthday. Clara shrugged, but the gesture was tense. Everything's technically his. That's how he maintains control. Caleb wanted to say something comforting, but platitudes felt cheap in the face of what she was dealing with. So instead he just said, Coffee? Please. They settled in the kitchen while Emma spread her drawings across the table, narrating each dragon's backstory with elaborate detail. Clara listened with genuine attention, asking questions about scale patterns and fire-breathing techniques, and gradually the tension in her shoulders eased. This one's my favorite, Emma said, pointing to a drawing of a blue dragon with silver wings. Her name is Stella, and she protects people who are scared. She doesn't fight with fire, she fights with kindness. That sounds like the best kind of dragon, Clara said softly. Daddy says the strongest thing you can be is kind, even when people are mean to you. Clara's eyes found Caleb's across the table. Your daddy's right about a lot of things. The morning drifted into afternoon in a pleasant haze. Clara unpacked her art supplies in the corner of the living room Caleb cleared for her, setting up a makeshift studio with the kind of careful attention that spoke of years of practice. Emma helped, carrying brushes and asking a million questions about color theory and composition. Why is that one blue but also sort of purple? Emma asked, examining a tube of paint. Because sometimes colors are more complex than we think at first glance, Clara explained. Sometimes what looks like one thing is actually a mixture of lots of different things working together. Like people? Clara stopped, looked at Emma with something like wonder. Yeah, exactly like people. After lunch, sandwiches that Clara insisted on helping make, Caleb retreated to the garage to work on the truck. He'd been at it maybe 20 minutes when Clara appeared in the doorway. Can I paint out here? The light's incredible. Sure. Might get noisy, though. That's okay. I like the ambient sound. My studio at school is too quiet. Makes me overthink everything. She set up an easel she'd brought, positioned a fresh canvas, and started mixing colors on a palette. Caleb tried to focus on the brake line he was replacing, but he found himself watching her instead. The way she stood back to assess her work, head tilted, the way she made decisive marks with the brush, no hesitation, the way she occasionally caught her bottom lip between her teeth when she was concentrating. You can ask, Clara said without looking away from the canvas. Ask what? Whatever you're wondering. I can feel you thinking from over there. Caleb set down his wrench, wiped his hands. What are you painting? Honestly, I'm not totally sure yet. I'm working intuitively today. She added a sweep of deep blue to what was becoming a landscape. Sometimes you just have to trust your hands to know what your brain hasn't figured out yet. That how you usually work? No, usually I overplan everything. Sketch it out, measure proportions, analyze composition until all the life's been drained out of it. She stepped back, examined what she'd done. My professors love it. Very technical, very controlled. But it feels empty to me. Like I'm painting someone else's idea of what art should be. So why do it that way? Because that's what gets you good grades. What gets your work selected for shows. What makes people in the art world take you seriously. Clara loaded her brush with a warm ochre. Or at least, that's what I tell myself. Maybe I'm just scared of what would happen if I painted what I actually feel instead of what I think I should feel. Caleb leaned against the workbench, studying her. What do you actually feel? She was quiet for a long moment, adding layers to the canvas with quick, assured strokes. Trapped, angry, lonely, hopeful. Another pause. Terrified. Of what? That I'm making a huge mistake. That I'm going to crash and burn without my father's money. That I'm not as strong as I need to be to actually do this. She set down the brush, turned to face him fully. That I'm fooling myself thinking I could ever belong in a world like this one. What world is that? Real, honest, where people mean what they say and say what they mean, where a 7-year-old teaches you about kindness and a mechanic shows you more about integrity in a weekend than you learned in 26 years of private schools and country clubs. Caleb held her gaze, saw the vulnerability there beneath the defensive sarcasm. You're not fooling yourself, Clara. You're just not used to a place where you don't have to perform all the time. How do you do that? She asked quietly. Do what? See things so clearly, cut through all the noise and just understand. I don't know about clearly, but when you've had to rebuild your whole life from scratch, you get pretty good at figuring out what's real and what's just set dressing. He picked up the wrench again, turned it over in his hands. You want my honest opinion? Always. I think you're braver than you know. It takes guts to walk away from everything familiar, even when it's hurting you. Most people just stay because it's easier than facing the unknown. He met her eyes. You're facing it. That counts for something. I'm terrified, she admitted. Good. Means you're doing something that matters. Emma appeared then, saving them both from the weight of the moment. She'd brought her own drawing supplies and announced her intention to make art alongside Clara, which devolved into a giggly collaboration that involved far more paint on hands than on paper. Caleb worked on the truck while their laughter filled the garage, and for the first time in 6 years, the space didn't feel haunted by his father's absence. It felt alive with new possibility. Dinner was simple. Pasta with marinara sauce that Clara helped make, teaching Emma how to tear basil with her fingers instead of cutting it. They ate at the kitchen table, Emma monopolizing the conversation with elaborate plans for a dragon-themed Halloween costume. I could paint it, Clara offered. If you want, I'm pretty good with fabric paint. Emma's eyes went wide with joy. Really? You do that? Of course, we could design it together. Caleb watched them plan, saw Emma's absolute trust in this woman she barely knew, and felt something tighten in his chest. Because Emma was getting attached, and if Clara left, if this was just a temporary escape before she went back to her real life, his daughter would be devastated. But he couldn't protect Emma from every potential hurt, couldn't bubble wrap her heart just because he was afraid of what might happen. All he could do was be present, pay attention, and help her through whatever came. After Emma went to bed, Caleb and Clara sat on the back porch with coffee, watching stars emerge in the clear autumn sky. The temperature had dropped, and Clara had wrapped herself in one of his jackets, the sleeves hanging past her fingertips. I need to figure out what I'm doing, she said into the comfortable silence. Like, practically. My father's going to cut off my tuition. I've got maybe $2,000 in an account he doesn't control, money from selling a few paintings. That'll last maybe a month if I'm careful. You could get a job. Doing what? I have a bachelor's in art history and half an MFA, not exactly drowning in marketable skills. You could teach. Art classes for kids, maybe. I bet Mrs. Chen at the library would know who to talk to. Caleb sipped his coffee. Or you could paint. Actually paint and sell your work instead of just doing it for grades. It's not that simple. You can't just decide to be a working artist. Why not? The question seemed to stump her. Because you need connections, a gallery, a reputation. You need work that's good enough to sell and people willing to buy it. Caleb cut in gently. Everything else is just gatekeeping. Clara pulled the jacket tighter around herself. You make everything sound so simple. Not simple, just less complicated than people who benefit from the complication want you to believe. He set down his mug. Look, I'm not saying it'll be easy. Building a life on your own terms never is. But you're already doing the hardest part. You left. Everything else is just problem solving. What if I fail? Then you fail. and you figure out what's next. That's how it works. You ever fail at anything? Clara asked. Every day. I fail at being patient with customers who think they know more about their car than I do. I fail at getting Emma to eat vegetables. I failed at keeping my marriage together, though honestly that one was mutual. He smiled slightly. The trick isn't avoiding failure, it's not letting it stop you. They sat in silence, the night cool and clear around them. Somewhere in the distance an owl called. Clara shifted closer, and Caleb felt the warmth of her beside him even through the jacket. Can I tell you something? She said quietly. Yeah. I haven't felt this calm in years, just sitting here drinking coffee, not having to be anyone but myself. She looked at him, and in the porch light her face was open and honest. Thank you for giving me that. You're giving it to yourself. I'm just providing the porch. She laughed, soft and genuine. You're going to say it's not a big deal no matter what, aren't you? It's not a big deal. It's just a porch and some coffee and someone who sees me, Clara interrupted. Someone who doesn't want me to be anyone other than who I am. That's rare, Caleb. That's precious. And I need you to know I don't take it for granted. The moment stretched between them, fragile and weighted with things neither of them was quite ready to say. Caleb felt the pull toward her, the desire to close the space between them, to see if her lips were as soft as they looked. But he held back, because Clara was in transition, was vulnerable, and the last thing she needed was another person expecting something from her. We should probably get some sleep, he said, standing before he could second-guess himself. Tomorrow's Sunday. If you want, we could drive out to the coast. Emma loves the tide pools. Clara stood too, handed back his jacket. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and she didn't pull away immediately. I'd like that. The coast sounds perfect. Inside, Caleb set her up in his room over her continued protests, brought her fresh towels and an extra blanket. Bathroom's across the hall. Help yourself to whatever you need. Caleb? She stopped him as he was leaving. I meant it about staying through Sunday, if that's still okay. It's okay. And maybe next weekend too? I could start looking for a place to stay in Eugene. Something cheap. A room somewhere. I just need a little time to figure things out. And hope and concern warred in Caleb's chest. You sure about this? About staying in Eugene instead of going back to Portland? No, Clara said honestly, but I'm more sure about this than I am about anything else. And right now, that's enough. He nodded, left her there, settled himself on the couch that was less comfortable than he remembered. Through the walls, he could hear the old house settling, the familiar creaks and groans of a structure that had weathered decades of storms. His phone buzzed with the text from an unknown number. Mr. Hayes, this is Richard Bennett. I'm aware my daughter has imposed upon your hospitality. I'd like to discuss retrieving her and her belongings at your earliest convenience. I'm prepared to compensate you for your time and trouble. Caleb stared at the message, anger building slowly. Compensate him. Like Clara was lost luggage. Like this was a transaction that could be settled with money. He typed back carefully. Mr. Bennett, your daughter is an adult who makes her own choices. She's welcome here as long as she wants to stay. I'm not interested in compensation or discussion. Respectfully, Caleb Hayes. The response came within seconds. You have no idea what you're involving yourself in. Clara is not well. She makes impulsive decisions when she's emotional. I'm trying to protect her. From what? Caleb typed. From herself. From people who would take advantage of her vulnerability. From a life of struggle she's not equipped to handle. Caleb looked at the message for a long moment, then replied. Maybe you should let her decide what she's equipped to handle. Good night, Mr. Bennett. He turned off his phone before any response could come, before Richard Bennett could say anything else that would make Caleb want to drive to Portland and have a very different kind of conversation. Because Clara wasn't fragile. She was strong enough to walk away from everything she'd known, strong enough to face an uncertain future, strong enough to choose struggle over comfortable captivity. And if Richard Bennett couldn't see that about his own daughter, then he didn't deserve to have her in his life. But as Caleb lay in the darkness, he couldn't shake the worry that had taken root. Because Richard Bennett had resources, had power, had decades of experience bending the world to his will. And Caleb was just a mechanic in a small town with a half-restored truck and a 7-year-old daughter. What could he really do if Bennett decided to force the issue? The question followed him into restless sleep, where he dreamed of storms and locked doors and Clara standing on the other side, just out of reach. Sunday morning came gray and heavy with the threat of rain. Emma was disappointed about the coast, but Clara suggested they make art instead, and soon the living room was transformed into a studio with drop cloths and paints everywhere. Caleb watched them work, Clara showing Emma techniques with infinite patience, and tried to ignore the text messages that kept coming through on Clara's phone. "He won't stop," she said during a break, showing Caleb the screen. "He's threatening to report the car stolen, to freeze what's left of my accounts, to contact the school and tell them I've had a mental health crisis. Has he tried calling you?" 43 times since yesterday. Clara's hands were shaking slightly. "I blocked his number after the 20th. Then he started using his secretary's phone. Then his lawyer's." "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to just give him back the stupid car, close the accounts he controls, cut every tie." She set down her phone like it was burning her. "But I'm scared. What if he's right? What if I can't do this alone?" Caleb crouched beside her, waited until she met his eyes. "You're not alone. And you're not fragile. You're someone who survived 26 years in a gilded cage and still came out with her soul intact. That takes strength most people don't have. Or stupidity. Not mutually exclusive," he said, earning a small smile. "But I'm betting on strength." Emma wandered over, paint smudged and happy. "Clara, can we paint the sky? Like a really big sky with all the colors?" "Absolutely. What colors should we use?" As Emma launched into an elaborate description of her perfect sky, Caleb's own phone buzzed. Another message from Richard Bennett. "Mr. Hayes, I'm prepared to make this worth your while to cooperate. Name your price." And then, a moment later, "Or I can make things very difficult for you. I have lawyers who specialize in removing obstacles. Your choice." Caleb deleted both messages without responding. But the threat lingered, cold and certain as the rain that was starting to fall outside. Because men like Richard Bennett didn't make empty threats, and Caleb had just put himself and Emma directly in his sights. The afternoon darkened early, the rain settling in with the permanence of a season changing. Clara's phone rang again, a number she didn't recognize. She answered this time, put it on speaker. "Clara Bennett?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes?" "This is Jennifer Morrison from Bennett Holdings Legal Department. I'm calling to inform you that your father has initiated proceedings to have you declared mentally incompetent due to your recent erratic behavior. He's concerned for your well-being and believes you need professional evaluation and care." Clara's face went white. "He can't do that." "Actually, Ms. Bennett, given your recent history of impulsive decisions and your current mental health concerns, he absolutely can. We'd like to arrange for you to meet with a psychiatric evaluator at your earliest convenience." "I don't have mental health concerns. I'm just making choices my father doesn't like." "Be that as it may, the evaluation is legally required now that proceedings have begun. If you don't cooperate voluntarily, we'll be forced to pursue other avenues." "What other avenues?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss that, but I'd strongly advise cooperation, Ms. Bennett. This can be resolved quietly and quickly, or it can become very public and protracted. The choice is yours." The line went dead. Clara stood frozen, the phone still in her hand, her breathing shallow and quick. Caleb moved to her, took the phone gently, set it aside. "He's trying to have me committed," she whispered. "He's actually trying to have me committed. He's threatening it. That doesn't mean he can actually do it. You don't know him. You don't know what he's capable of when people don't fall in line." Clara's voice was rising, panic threading through. "He'll find doctors who'll say whatever he pays them to say. He'll manufacture evidence of instability. He'll—" "Clara." Caleb took her shoulders, made her look at him. "Breathe. You're not crazy. You're not unstable. And no court is going to commit you for leaving your father's house and spending a weekend with friends. You don't understand the kind of power he has." "Maybe not. But I understand that you're stronger than his threats. And I understand that you don't have to face this alone." Emma had gone quiet, watching them with wide, worried eyes. Clara saw her, seemed to pull herself together through sheer force of will. "I'm sorry," she said to Emma. "I didn't mean to scare you. Are you okay?" Emma's small voice was tight with concern. "Yeah, sweetie, I'm okay, just having a hard day." "Daddy says hard days don't last forever. They just feel like they do."
Clara's eyes filled with tears. Your daddy's a very smart man. The rest of the day passed in tense quiet, all of them pretending everything was normal even though the threat hung heavy in the air. They made dinner together, watched a movie, went through the motions of ordinary Sunday evening.
But when Emma was in bed and it was just the two of them again, Clara finally broke. I have to go back, she said, her voice flat and defeated. I have to at least talk to him, try to reason with him. He's not interested in reason, he's interested in control. I know, but maybe if I agree to some kind of compromise, he'll back off. Let me finish my degree at least. Give me time to figure things out. And then what? You think he'll ever really let you go? Clara wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller than Caleb had ever seen her. Probably not. But at least if I cooperate, he won't come after you, won't try to hurt Emma to get to me. He threatened Emma? Not explicitly, but that lawyer, those messages to you, they're warnings. He's showing you what he's capable of. And if I don't go back, he'll escalate. She looked at Caleb with raw desperation. I can't let him hurt you because of me. I can't. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to tell her they could fight this together, that Bennett's threats were empty, that running back to him now would only make everything worse. But he saw the fear in her eyes, the weight of 26 years of her father's control bearing down on her, and he understood. She wasn't ready yet, wasn't strong enough to stand against the full force of Richard Bennett's will. Maybe she would be someday, but not today. Okay, he said quietly, if that's what you need to do. Relief and devastation warred on Clara's face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I could do this. You still can, just maybe not today. She nodded, wiped at her eyes. I should leave in the morning, before Emma wakes up. I don't want to have to say goodbye to her. She'll want to say goodbye to you. I know, but I'm not strong enough for that either. They stood in the small kitchen, the space between them feeling vast and uncrossable. All the possibility that had been building over the weekend was collapsing, crushed under the weight of Richard Bennett's power and Clara's fear. For what it's worth, Caleb said, I think you're making a mistake. I know. Clara's smile was broken. But it's my mistake to make. She went to bed in his room one last time, and Caleb lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hammer against the house like fists demanding entry. And he thought about storms and doors and the courage it took to walk through them in either direction. But mostly he thought about Clara, packing her bags in the next room, preparing to walk back into her cage because she'd been taught too well to believe she couldn't survive outside it. And there was nothing he could do but let her go. Caleb didn't sleep. He lay on the couch, listening to the rain and the quiet sounds of Clara moving around in his bedroom, packing her things with careful precision. Around 3 a.m, he heard his bedroom door open, heard her footsteps pause in the hallway. Caleb, you awake? Yeah. She appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from the kitchen. I can't sleep either. Come sit. She crossed to the armchair, curled up in it like a child seeking shelter. In the darkness, she looked impossibly young and impossibly old all at once. Tell me I'm doing the right thing, she said. I can't. Because I don't think you are. Tell me anyway. Lie to me. Caleb sat up, ran his hands through his hair. What do you want me to say, Clara? That running back to your father will solve anything? That he'll suddenly respect your boundaries because you capitulated this time? We both know that's not true. But at least he'll leave you alone. Leave Emma alone. You think that matters more to me than you giving up? The words hung in the air between them, heavier than he'd intended. Clara drew her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be the person who stands up to him. Every time I try, I hear his voice in my head telling me I'm being dramatic, that I'm unstable, that I need him to function. And part of me still believes it. That's what abusers do. They make you doubt your own reality until you can't trust yourself anymore. He's my father. That doesn't make it not abuse. Clara flinched like he'd struck her. Don't make it that word. He's threatened to have you committed for making your own choices. He's used money to control every aspect of your life. He's isolated you from anyone who might challenge his authority. What would you call that? Overprotective, controlling, difficult. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face in the darkness. Not abuse. It can't be abuse because that would mean everything. My whole life has been a lie, and I can't handle that right now. Caleb moved to her, knelt beside the chair, took her hands in his. They were freezing. Okay, he said gently. We don't have to call it anything tonight. But Clara, you need to understand something. If you go back now, it's going to be 10 times harder to leave again. He's going to tighten his grip, watch you closer, make sure you never have another opportunity to slip away. I know. And you're going anyway. I don't know what else to do. The words burst out of her, desperate and raw. You make it sound so simple. Just leave. Just choose freedom. Just be brave. But you don't understand what it's like to have everything you've ever known be conditional. To know that one wrong move means losing access to your own money, your own car, your education, everything. You rebuilt your life after loss, but you always had something that was yours. I've never had that. Never. So take it now. Start building something that's yours. With what? $2,000 in a dream? Be realistic, Caleb. I am being realistic. You're talented. You're smart. You could work, could build a life. As what? A barista? A waitress? Teaching art to kids for $12 an hour? Her voice was bitter. I've never had a job. I don't know how to budget or pay bills or do any of the things normal people do. My father made sure I'd always be dependent on him. Then learn. People learn new things every day. Not everyone's as strong as you. I'm not strong, Clara. I'm just stubborn. There's a difference. He squeezed her hands. But I'll tell you what I told Emma when she was scared to start school. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do the thing even though you're terrified. And you've already done that. You already left once. That's the hardest part. And look how well that turned out. They sat in silence, the rain a steady drumbeat overhead. Caleb wanted to shake her, wanted to make her see what he saw. A woman strong enough to survive her father's control with her soul intact, talented enough to make a living from her art. If she just believed in herself. Brave enough to walk through a storm because staying felt worse than leaving. But he couldn't make her see it. She had to find it herself. What time's your bus? He asked finally. 6:30. I called a car for 6. 2.5 hours. Caleb stood, pulled her to her feet. Come on. Where? The garage. If these are your last few hours of freedom, let's not waste them sitting in the dark feeling terrible. He led her through the quiet house to the garage, flicked on the overhead lights. The F-150 sat patient and half-finished, a monument to steady progress and promises kept. Hand me that wrench, Caleb said, pointing. The 3/4 inch. Clara found it, passed it to him. What are we doing? Finishing what I started. I've been putting off the final engine work because I wanted it to be perfect, but perfect's the enemy of done, and I'm tired of waiting. He worked while she watched, explaining what he was doing, letting the familiar rhythm of mechanics soothe the jagged edges of the night. After a while, Clara started handing him tools before he asked, anticipating what he'd need next. You're good at this, he said. I'm just paying attention. That's most of what being good at something is. And she was quiet for a moment, then, can I tell you what I'm really afraid of? Yeah. I'm afraid that if I stay, if I really try to build a life here, I'll fail. And then I'll have lost everything, my father's support, my credibility, my safety net, for nothing. At least if I go back now, I still have options. Those aren't options, Clara. They're just different versions of the same cage. Maybe, but it's a familiar cage, and there's comfort in familiarity. Caleb set down the wrench, turned to face her fully. You want to know what I think your real fear is? Probably not, but tell me anyway. I think you're afraid that if you stay, you'll be happy, really happy. And that will mean acknowledging how unhappy you've been all these years. It'll mean facing the fact that your father stole your childhood, your autonomy, your chance to figure out who you are without his voice in your head. He paused. And that's a grief too big to carry alone. So it's easier to go back, to pretend it's not that bad, to keep believing the lie that his control is love. Clara's face crumpled. Stop. Please stop. Why? Because it's true? Because I can't do anything about it. Don't you get that? Even if everything you're saying is right, even if he's been controlling and manipulative and all of it, I still can't just walk away. I'm not strong enough. Not yet, maybe. But you could be. On what timeline? How long until I'm magically brave enough to stand up to a man who spent my entire life making sure I can't? She was crying again, hard sobs that shook her whole body. I'm 26 years old and I'm terrified of my own father. How pathetic is that? Caleb pulled her into his arms, held her while she cried into his shirt. It's not pathetic. It's human. And it's what happens when someone with power uses it to hurt people who can't fight back. I should be able to fight back by now. Says who? There's no timeline for healing from this kind of damage. You get there when you get there. She pulled back slightly, looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. What if I never get there? What if I'm always going to be this scared? Then you'll be scared. But maybe you'll be scared and free instead of scared and trapped. That's still progress. Clara laughed, broken and wet. You're relentless, you know that? Emma says I'm stubborn. I prefer determined. I'm going to miss you, she said quietly. Both of you. This house. The way it feels possible to breathe here. You could stay. The offer's still open. I know, and that makes it so much harder to leave. They worked in silence until the sky started to lighten, gray dawn creeping through the garage windows. Caleb finished the last bolt, wiped his hands, stepped back to survey his work. That's it, he said. Engine's done. Just needs the bodywork now and she'll be ready to drive. Your dad would be proud. Maybe. Or he'd tell me I did it wrong and make me do it again. Caleb smiled slightly. He was a perfectionist, drove me crazy sometimes. But I understood why. When you love something, you want to do it right. Clara was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Caleb, the sound of tires on gravel cut her off. Through the garage door window, they could see headlights cutting through the morning dimness. That's my car, Clara said, her voice small and defeated. They walked to the house together, and Clara gathered her bags from the bedroom while Caleb stood in the kitchen feeling helpless and angry and sad all at once. When she emerged, laden with canvas bags and her art supply case, he took some of the weight from her. Emma's door was still closed, his daughter sleeping peacefully, unaware that Clara was leaving. Clara paused outside the door, her hand hovering over the knob. I should say goodbye to her. That'll make it real, Caleb warned gently. It's already real. She opened the door quietly, slipped inside. Caleb waited in the hall, heard the murmur of Clara's voice, Emma's sleepy confusion, then the sound of crying, both of them. When Clara emerged 5 minutes later, her face was blotchy and her hands were shaking. She asked me to stay, Clara whispered. She said I could have her room and she'd sleep in the living room and we could paint together every day. What did you tell her? That I have to go home. That sometimes grown-ups have to do things they don't want to do, that I'd miss her. Clara's voice broke. She asked if she did something wrong, to make me leave. Caleb felt fury spike through him. Not at Clara, but at Richard Bennett, at the situation, at the whole twisted system that had brought them to this moment. She'll understand eventually. Will she? Or will she just learn what I learned, that people always leave, that love is conditional, that you can't trust anyone to stay? That's not what I'm teaching her, and it's not what you're teaching her either. You're just making the choice you need to make to survive. Survival's not the same as living. The driver honked, impatient. Clara flinched at the sound. They loaded her bags into the trunk, and Clara stood on the porch one last time, looking at the house like she was trying to burn it into memory. Thank you, she said, for everything, for being kind when I needed it, for making me believe, even for just a weekend, that there was another way to live. There is another way, Clara. You just have to choose it. I'm not as brave as you think I am. I know exactly how brave you are. You're the one who doesn't see it yet. She moved toward him like she might hug him, then stopped, uncertain. Caleb made the decision for both of them, pulled her close, felt her arms wrap around him tight and desperate. If you change your mind, he said into her hair, the door's always open. Doesn't matter when, doesn't matter how. Just come back. What if it's too late by then? It's never too late to choose yourself. She pulled away, climbed into the car without looking back. Caleb watched the taillights disappear down the driveway, watched the morning swallow her up, and felt something in his chest crack clean through. Inside, Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, her rabbit clutched tight, tears streaming down her face.
Why did she leave? She asked. Did we do something wrong?
Caleb sat down beside her, pulled her into his lap. No, sweet pea. Claire's just scared. Sometimes when people are scared, they run back to things that hurt them because at least the hurt is familiar. That's stupid. Yeah, but it's also human. Will she come back? I don't know. Emma cried into his shoulder while Caleb rubbed her back and wished he had better answers, wished he could protect her from this kind of hurt, wished a lot of things that wouldn't change what had just happened. Eventually, Emma's tears subsided into hiccups, and she pulled back to look at him with swollen eyes. Are you sad too, Daddy? Yeah, sweet pea. I'm sad too. Because you liked her? Because I wanted her to be happy, and I don't think she will be where she's going. Then we should go get her, Emma declared with 7-year-old certainty. Like in the movies, we should go tell her we want her to stay. It doesn't work like that in real life, honey. People have to choose for themselves. But what if she's choosing wrong? Caleb kissed the top of her head. Then she's choosing wrong. And maybe she'll figure that out eventually. Or maybe she won't. But it's still her choice to make. The week that followed was gray and heavy. Emma asked about Clara every day. When was she coming back? Could they call her? Could they send her a picture of the painting they'd worked on together? Caleb answered as honestly as he could while trying to shield his daughter from the full weight of what Clara was walking back into. He threw himself into work, staying late at the shop, taking on extra projects. Anything to avoid the empty house and the silence that had returned like an unwelcome house guest. At night, he worked on the truck's bodywork, sanding and priming with methodical precision, trying not to think about Clara standing in this garage, asking questions about restoration and second chances. His phone stayed silent. No text from Clara, no updates, nothing. The silence felt deliberate, like she was severing all connection, making it clean. On Thursday, he got a call from Mrs. Chen at the library. Caleb, honey, I've got some books here that your friend Clara checked out. They're overdue. Is she going to return them, or should I just mark them lost? I'll come get them, Caleb said. Add them to my account. He picked up the books that evening, the landscape painting manual and 2 others she'd grabbed, one on color theory and one on building and art practice. He carried them home, set them on the shelf in his bedroom, couldn't bring himself to open them. Friday evening, Emma was drawing at the kitchen table when she said suddenly, I think Clara's lonely. Caleb looked up from the bills he was sorting. Why do you think that? Because she was happy here. And if she went back to a place that makes her not happy, she's probably lonely even when there are other people around. Emma added careful details to her drawing, a dragon that looked suspiciously like Stella, the kind one who protected scared people. That's the worst kind of lonely. When you're lonely even when you're not alone. Out of the mouths of babes, Caleb thought. That's very wise, sweet pea. I learned it from you. Yeah? When did I say that? You didn't say it, but sometimes after Mommy left, you'd be at the table with me, but your eyes looked far away. Like you were lonely, even though I was right there. Emma looked up at him, her young face serious. I remember more than you think I do. Caleb's throat tightened. I'm sorry you saw that. It's okay. You got unlonely eventually. Maybe Clara will too. Maybe. But as the days turned into a week, then 2, Caleb began to doubt it. Clara had made her choice, had walked back into her father's control with eyes wide open. And while part of him understood the fear, the conditioning, the sheer overwhelming difficulty of starting over, another part was angry that she'd given up so easily. He'd offered her a way out, had been willing to help her figure it out, to support her while she found her footing, and she'd chosen money and security over freedom. It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. He'd known her for 3 days, had no claim on her, no right to expect anything. But somehow in those 3 days, she'd become woven into his life in a way he hadn't anticipated. Her absence was a constant reminder of what might have been. The house felt emptier, the garage felt quieter. Emma's drawings began to feature fewer dragons and more sad-looking girls standing alone in the rain. We can't keep doing this, Caleb said to her on a Sunday afternoon 2 weeks after Clara left. We can't keep waiting for her to come back. Why not? Because she's not coming, and we need to move forward. But what if she does come back and we move forward without her? Then we'll adjust. But Emma, honey, we can't put our lives on hold for something that might not happen. Emma considered this, then returned to her drawing without argument. But that night, Caleb heard her crying in her room, and when he went to comfort her, she clung to him and said,
"I miss her, Daddy. Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay. I miss her too." "Will it stop hurting eventually?" "Yeah, it'll get easier. Different, but easier." "How long?" Caleb didn't have an answer for that. 3 weeks after Clara left, on a Tuesday that felt no different from any other, Caleb was under a Honda Civic at Donnelly's shop when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him slide out from under the car and wipe his hands. "Hello? Mr. Hayes?" A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. "This is Sarah Chen from Portland Community Legal Aid. I'm calling regarding Clara Bennett." Caleb's heart kicked hard. "Is she okay?" She's asked me to contact you. She's requested legal assistance in filing for emancipation from her father's financial control and for a restraining order based on harassment and threats. But she's afraid to leave her apartment without some kind of support network in place. She mentioned that you'd offered to help if she ever needed it. She's leaving? She's actually leaving? Trying to. But Mr. Bennett has made things very difficult. He's frozen all her accounts, reported her car stolen, contacted her university to flag her for psychiatric evaluation. She's essentially trapped in her apartment with no resources. What does she need? A safe place to stay while we process the legal filings. Somewhere her father can't find her or pressure her to come back. She mentioned Eugene, mentioned your home specifically, but she was concerned about asking. "Tell her yes," Caleb interrupted. "Tell her to come. Tell her the door's open and she doesn't need to ask permission or apologize or anything else. Just come. I'll let her know. She'll probably arrive sometime this evening if she can arrange transportation. Mr. Hayes, I should warn you, Richard Bennett is not going to take this well. There may be legal threats, harassment, attempts to intimidate you into returning his daughter. Let him try." "You sound very certain." "I am. Clara deserves a chance to build her own life, and if I can help with that, I will." Sarah Chen was quiet for a moment. She's lucky to have someone in her corner. She shouldn't need luck. She should just need basic human decency. But I'll take it. After he hung up, Caleb stood in the garage bay, oil-stained and shaking with something that felt like hope and terror mixed together. She was coming back. Clara was actually coming back. He called his boss, said he needed to leave early, got the okay without questions. Drove home faster than he should have, his mind racing with logistics. She'd need the bedroom again, probably for longer than a weekend this time. Emma would need to understand that this might be complicated, that Clara might need time and space to heal. They'd need to figure out money, work, how to make this sustainable. But first, they just needed to get her here, get her safe. Emma was at school for another hour. Caleb cleaned the house in a frenzy, changed the sheets in his bedroom, made sure there was food in the fridge. His hands were shaking. He couldn't seem to stop them. Around 4, he got a text from the number Sarah Chen had called from. "Is it really okay? I don't want to impose. I don't want to put you and Emma in danger, but I don't know where else to go." Caleb typed back quickly. "Come home. We're waiting." The response came almost immediately. "Home. I like that word. So do we. See you soon." He picked Emma up from school, told her carefully that Clara was coming back, but that things were different now, that she was leaving her father for good, and might need their help. Emma's face lit up like sunrise. "She's coming to stay? For real? If we can make it work, yeah." "We can make it work," Emma declared with absolute certainty. "We'll help her and she'll paint with me and everything will be perfect." "It might not be perfect, Sweet Pea. It might be really hard sometimes. Clara's been through a lot." "That's okay. Hard things are still worth doing if they matter. You taught me that." Caleb pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just notice it more when I say things you agree with." They waited together on the porch as the afternoon faded into evening, Emma doing homework while Caleb pretended to read, but actually just watched the road. The October air was cool and clear, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and possibility. Around 6, as the light was failing, a rideshare car appeared at the end of the driveway. Caleb stood, his heart hammering. Emma dropped her pencil and ran to the porch railing, bouncing on her toes. The car stopped. The door opened, and Clara stepped out. She looked different than she had 3 weeks ago. Thinner, more tired. something fragile in the set of her shoulders.
She was wearing jeans and a sweater, carrying the same canvas bag she'd left with, and when her eyes found Caleb's across the distance, he saw fear and hope and desperate gratitude all tangled together. Emma didn't wait. She launched herself off the porch and ran to Clara, throwing her arms around her waist with enough force to make Clara stumble backward. Clara dropped her bags and held on, burying her face in Emma's hair, her whole body shaking. Caleb walked over more slowly, gave them their moment. When Clara finally looked up at him over Emma's head, her face was streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry I left. I'm sorry I was weak. I'm sorry." "Stop," Caleb said gently. "You're here now. That's what matters." "I don't know if I can do this. I'm terrified." "That's okay. We're here. You're not doing it alone." Emma pulled back, looked up at Clara with fierce determination. "You can stay in my room.
I don't mind sleeping on the couch, and I'll share all my art supplies, and Daddy makes really good pancakes." Clara laughed through her tears. "That sounds perfect." They gathered her bags and walked to the house together, Emma chattering about everything Clara had missed, Caleb carrying the weight of her belongings and feeling like he was carrying something infinitely more precious, a trust that had been broken and mended, a hope that had died and been resurrected. Inside, Clara stood in the living room like she couldn't quite believe she was really here. Caleb set down her bags and turned to find her looking at him with raw vulnerability. "I went back," she said quietly. "I tried to make it work. I told myself I could endure it, could compromise, could find some middle ground. But he just got worse, more controlling, more demanding. He had my apartment monitored, had people following me, started scheduling psychiatric appointments without my consent." She wrapped her arms around herself. "And I realized that you were right. It was never going to get better. I was never going to be free unless I chose it, really chose it." "So you chose it." "I chose it. I called legal aid, told them everything, started building a case. And they said I needed somewhere to go, somewhere he couldn't reach me. And all I could think about was this house, this porch, you and Emma, and the way it felt like I could breathe here." "You can stay as long as you need," Caleb said. "We'll figure out the details as we go. Your life is about to get very complicated because of me." "Life's already complicated. This just makes it complicated in a way that matters." Clara moved toward him then, closed the distance between them, and wrapped her arms around him in a hug that felt like coming home. Caleb held her, felt her trembling, and knew that the hard part was just beginning, but they'd face it together. And that made all the difference. Emma insisted on making dinner, grilled cheese sandwiches that were slightly burnt on one side and perfect on the other. They ate at the kitchen table while Clara explained everything that had happened in the 3 weeks she'd been gone, her voice steady, but her hands shaking around her mug of tea. "He tried to have me committed," she said. "Actually went through with it. Had a psychiatrist come to the apartment, someone on his payroll, obviously. But I recorded the whole conversation on my phone. The doctor asking leading questions, trying to get me to say I was hearing voices or having suicidal thoughts. When I refused to play along, my father threatened to have me forcibly hospitalized for my own safety." "That's when you called legal aid?" Caleb asked. "That's when I realized I was in actual danger. Not just emotional manipulation anymore, but real legal jeopardy." Claire set down her mug with deliberate care. Sarah Chen was amazing. She listened to the recordings, reviewed the text messages, documented everything. She said we have a strong case for harassment and potentially even unlawful restraint. But it's going to take time. "How much time?" "Weeks, maybe months. The restraining order hearing is in 10 days. The financial emancipation paperwork is more complex. Could take up to 6 months to fully disentangle my accounts and credit history from his control." Emma, who had been quietly absorbing all of this, spoke up. "What happens at the hearing?" Clara looked at her, seemed to weigh how much to share with a 7-year-old. "A judge will decide if my father has to stay away from me, if he can't call or text or come to where I'm living." "Good," Emma said firmly. "He should have to stay away. He's mean to you." "It's more complicated than that, sweetie." "No, it's not. Mean is mean." Emma carried her plate to the sink with the confidence of a child who saw the world in clear lines. "You don't have to forgive people just because they're family. Daddy taught me that." Clara's eyes found Caleb's across the table. "You taught her that?" "Her mother's parents wanted visitation rights after she left," Caleb said quietly.
tried to claim we were keeping Emma from them. But they'd never made any effort to see her before that, only wanted access when they thought they could use her to hurt me. Judge ruled in our favor, but Emma heard enough to understand that DNA doesn't automatically make someone safe. Families are the people who love you and keep you safe, Emma recited like a lesson learned by heart. Not just the people you're related to. Your daughter is extraordinary, Clara said. I know. After dinner, they settled into a routine that felt both new and familiar. Emma showed Clara her new dragon drawings while Caleb cleared the dishes. Clara set up her art supplies in the corner of the living room that had somehow become hers, arranging brushes and paints with the focused attention of someone grounding themselves in the physical world. Around 8, Emma went to bed with minimal protest, extracting a promise from Clara that she'd still be there in the morning. I promise, Clara said. I'm not leaving again. You promised last time, too. The words landed like a blow. Clara flinched, and Caleb saw the shame wash over her face. But she didn't make excuses, didn't try to explain it away. You're right, she said to Emma. I did promise, and then I broke that promise. I was scared, and I made a choice that hurt you. That wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry. Are you going to do it again? I hope not, but I can't promise I'll never be scared again. What I can promise is that if I am scared, I'll talk to you and your dad about it instead of just running away. Is that okay? Emma considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Okay, but you have to mean it. I mean it. After Emma was asleep, Caleb and Clara ended up on the back porch again, the same place they'd sat 3 weeks ago when everything had felt possible and terrifying. The October night was cool and clear, stars brilliant overhead in the way they only were far from city lights. She's not going to trust me easily, Clara said. No, but she'll give you the chance to earn it back. That's more than some people would do. What about you? Caleb turned to look at her. What about me? Do you trust me? Or are you waiting for me to bolt again? He thought about lying, about offering easy reassurance, but Clara deserved honesty. I'm cautiously optimistic. You came back, which counts for a lot. But I'm also aware that the next few months are going to be hard. Your father's going to escalate. Legal battles are draining. You're going to have moments where running back seems easier than staying. And when I have those moments, then you tell me, and we talk it through, and you make a choice with full information instead of just reacting from fear. He paused. But Clara, I need you to understand something. Emma's already attached to you. So am I, if I'm being honest. If you're going to leave again, you need to do it now before we're in any deeper. I'm not leaving, Clara said, and her voice was stronger than he'd heard it. I know I don't have a great track record. I know I gave you every reason not to believe me, but I spent 3 weeks back in that apartment, back under his control, and every single day I thought about this porch, this house, you and Emma, and the way it feels like I can be myself here. And I realized I'd rather struggle and be free than be comfortable and trapped. Struggling isn't romantic, Clara. It's exhausting and demoralizing, and some days you're going to hate it. I know, but at least it'll be my struggle, my choice, my life. She turned to face him fully. I'm done being my father's doll. I'm done performing for approval I'm never going to get. I'm ready to figure out who I actually am when I'm not trying to be what someone else wants. That's going to take time. I've got time. And I've got a safe place to do it. That's more than I had before. They sat in comfortable silence, and Caleb felt something in his chest loosen, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Clara was here, she was staying, and while the road ahead was uncertain, at least they were walking it together. So, what's the plan? He asked. Practically speaking, Sarah says I should stay here through the restraining order hearing. After that, if things go well, I'll need to find work. Something stable that can support me while I finish my degree remotely. Clara pulled her sweater tighter against the night air. She suggested I might qualify for emergency financial aid from the university once the emancipation paperwork goes through. And I've been looking into grants for artists, fellowships, things like that. What about in the meantime? I have the $2,000 in cash. I can contribute to groceries, utilities, whatever you'll let me help with. Clara, you don't need to… Yes, I do. I need to pull my weight. I need to know I'm not just another person taking advantage of your kindness. She looked at him intently. Please, let me help. Let me be useful. Okay,
Caleb said. We'll figure it out together.
The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Emma singing tunelessly in the kitchen. She emerged from the bedroom to find Caleb making pancakes while Emma set the table with elaborate care, folding napkins into shapes that were supposed to be swans but looked more like crumpled paper. "You're still here," Emma said, like she'd needed to verify it with her own eyes. "I'm still here." "Good. Daddy's making chocolate chip pancakes. The chips are supposed to be a surprise, but I already saw them." Breakfast was warm and easy, the three of them falling into conversation about Emma's school project on habitats and Caleb's progress on the truck's bodywork. Clara offered to help with the painting, which led to a discussion of color matching and primer techniques that lasted through seconds and into the cleanup. "I need to go to the shop," Caleb said as they finished the dishes. "But you two okay here?" "We're good," Clara said. "I was thinking about doing some painting. Maybe Emma could help if she wants?" Emma's face lit up. "Can we do the big sky? The one with all the colors?" "Absolutely." Caleb left them to it, headed to work with a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt in weeks. When he checked his phone at lunch, he found a photo from Clara. Emma covered in paint, grinning hugely, standing in front of a canvas exploding with purples and blues and golds. The text underneath read, "We may have gotten carried away. Your living room might never recover." He smiled, sent back, "Worth it." The days developed a rhythm. Caleb worked while Clara and Emma painted, read, explored the area on long walks. Clara started cooking. Simple things at first, then more ambitious meals as she gained confidence. Emma taught her card games and told her elaborate stories about the characters in her dragon drawings. Slowly, carefully, trust began to rebuild. But the outside world wasn't going to leave them in peace. 5 days after Clara's return, Caleb came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, phone in hand, face pale. "What happened?" "My father filed a missing persons report, told the police I'm mentally unstable and potentially in danger. They called asking to do a welfare check." Caleb's stomach dropped. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That I'm an adult who left voluntarily, that I have legal representation, and that I'm perfectly safe." Sarah coached me on what to say. Clara set down the phone with shaking hands. "But they're sending someone out tomorrow anyway. Standard procedure when there's a mental health concern flagged." "We'll handle it," Caleb said, sitting across from her. "We'll explain the situation, show them you're fine, they'll close the case." "You don't know my father. He'll find another angle, he always does." "Then we'll handle that too." The police came the next afternoon, a young officer who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. She spoke with Clara privately, asked careful questions about her mental state and living situation. Clara answered with calm composure, showed the officer Sarah Chen's contact information, explained about the upcoming restraining order hearing. 40 minutes later, the officer left with a promise to note in her report that Clara was safe and residing voluntarily with friends. But the encounter left Clara shaken, reminded of just how far her father's reach extended. "He's not going to stop," she said that evening, standing at the kitchen counter while Caleb made dinner. "Even with a restraining order, even with legal emancipation, he's going to find ways to make my life difficult. That's who he is." "Maybe. But each time he tries, his case gets weaker and yours gets stronger." Sarah said that, right? She said a lot of things, mostly that this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Emma wandered in, picked up on the tension immediately. "Are you okay, Clara?" "Just having a hard day, sweetie." "Want to paint? Painting makes hard days better." Clara's expression softened. "You know what? That sounds perfect." They painted until dark, Emma narrating stories about each color choice while Clara followed her lead, letting the 7-year-old's intuition guide the composition. Caleb watched from the doorway, saw how Clara gradually relaxed into the process, how the fear in her eyes eased as she focused on something she could control. Later, after Emma was in bed, Clara showed him what they'd created, an abstract piece full of movement and light, chaotic but somehow coherent. "Emma said it's about being brave even when you're scared," Clara explained. "She said the dark colors are the scary things, and the bright colors are the love that protects you from them. She's got a good eye. She's got a good heart." Clara stepped back from the painting, studied it with an artist's critical gaze. "I want to do a series about this whole experience, about control and freedom and finding home in unexpected places. Maybe show it somewhere. Use the money to fund my independence. You think it'll sell? I don't know, but I need to try. I need to believe my work has value beyond just academic approval. She glanced at him. Would you mind if I use the garage sometimes? The light in there is incredible in the afternoons. Use whatever space you need. Consider it your studio. Over the next week, Clara threw herself into work with focused intensity. She painted in the mornings while Emma was at school, large canvases that captured something raw and honest about her journey. She sketched constantly, filling notebook after notebook with ideas and compositions, and she researched grants, residencies, anything that might provide financial support while she built her career. Caleb watched her transform before his eyes. The careful, polished woman who'd shown up soaking wet on his porch becoming someone bolder, more assured. She laughed more easily, asked for what she needed, set boundaries when Emma got too demanding or when Caleb tried to do too much for her. I need to stand on my own feet, she told him when he offered to pay for new art supplies. Even if I wobble, especially if I wobble, that's how I'll learn balance. The restraining order hearing arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. Sarah Chen met them at the courthouse, professional in a way that somehow made Clara stand taller. Caleb stayed in the gallery with Emma, who'd insisted on coming despite his concerns about appropriateness. Clara needs to know we're here, Emma had said with unassailable logic. That's what family does. Richard Bennett arrived with two lawyers looking exactly like Caleb had imagined. Expensive suit, cold eyes, the kind of presence that commanded rooms. He glanced at Clara once, his expression unreadable, then focused entirely on his legal team. The hearing was brief and procedural. Sarah presented evidence of harassment, texts, voicemails, the attempted psychiatric commitment. Bennett's lawyers argued that he was simply a concerned father trying to help an unstable daughter. The judge, a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd heard every excuse in the book, listened with growing impatience. When it came time for Clara to testify, Caleb watched her walk to the stand with her head high. She answered every question with clear precision, never stumbling, never apologizing for her choices. When Bennett's lawyer tried to imply she was being manipulated by outside influences, she shut it down immediately. No one is manipulating me. For the first time in my life, I'm making my own choices. My father can't accept that, which is why we're here. The judge granted a temporary restraining order on the spot, to remain in effect pending a full hearing in 60 days. Bennett couldn't contact Clara directly, couldn't come within 500 feet of her, couldn't use third parties to circumvent the order. Outside the courthouse, Clara stood on the steps looking stunned. We won, she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. First round, Sarah corrected gently. He'll appeal, try to get it overturned, but this is a good start. Emma threw her arms around Clara's waist. You were so brave in there. I was terrified. That's what brave means. Being scared but doing it anyway. Clara laughed, pulled Emma close. When did you get so wise? I told you, I've always been smart. They celebrated with ice cream at Minnie's, where Minnie took one look at Clara and declared, You look better than last time I saw you, less like you're about to break. I feel less like I'm about to break. Good, keep it up, and try the salted caramel, it's new. The weeks that followed settled into something approaching normal, though normal looked different than Caleb had imagined. Clara set up a real studio in the garage, organizing her supplies with the same care he used for his tools. She painted while he worked on the truck, both of them lost in their respective crafts, occasionally sharing observations or asking for opinions. Emma split her time between them, drawing alongside Clara or helping Caleb with simple mechanical tasks. The house was fuller, louder, more chaotic than it had been in years, and Caleb found he didn't mind at all. Clara got a job teaching 2 art classes a week at the community center, children's painting on Tuesdays, adult watercolor on Thursdays. The pay was modest but steady, enough to cover her share of groceries and utilities with a little left over. She was fiercely proud of that first paycheck, showed it to Caleb like it was a trophy. I earned this, me, with my own work. How does it feel? Terrifying and amazing, and like maybe I can actually do this. The financial emancipation process ground forward with bureaucratic slowness. Sarah filed motion after motion, documented every instance of Bennett trying to control Clara from a distance. He'd attempted to cancel her health insurance, tried to have her academic records flagged, even contacted her professors to express concerns about her stability. Each attempt was documented, added to the growing case file. And each attempt made it clear that this wasn't about a father's concern. It was about a man losing control and lashing out. In December, Clara got news that shifted everything. A small gallery in Portland, one that focused on emerging artists, had seen photos of her work online and wanted to do a show. 3 months away, March of next year, enough time to build a cohesive series. "I don't have enough pieces," she said, pacing the kitchen. "I've got maybe 6 finished canvases. They want 12 to 15. "So you make more," Caleb said simply. "In 3 months?" "While teaching and dealing with legal proceedings and trying to stay sane." "You made 6 while doing all that. What's 9 more?" She stopped pacing, looked at him. "You make it sound possible." "Because it is. You just have to want it enough to do the work." Clara threw herself into creating with renewed purpose. The garage became her sanctuary, canvases stacked against every wall, the smell of paint and turpentine mixing with motor oil and metal. She worked late into the night sometimes, and Caleb would bring her coffee and sit quietly while she explained her process, her vision, what she was trying to capture. "It's about transformation," she said one night, stepping back from a canvas that showed a figure emerging from shadows into light. "About the moment when you realized the cage was never locked. You just had to reach for the door." "Is that what it felt like when you left?" "Not at first. At first it felt like jumping off a cliff. But now, looking back, I can see that I'd been reaching for the door for years. I just needed someone to show me it was okay to turn the handle. Emma and I didn't do anything special. You believed I could do it. That's everything." Christmas came quiet and warm. They decorated a small tree with ornaments Emma made from painted clay. Clara gave Emma a complete set of professional art supplies that made the little girl cry with joy. Emma gave Clara a painting she'd worked on in secret. The 3 of them standing in front of the house, dragons flying overhead, labeled in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "My family." Clara had to excuse herself to the bathroom, came back with red eyes and a fierce hug for Emma. "Thank you, sweetie. It's the best gift I've ever gotten." "Better than expensive stuff?" "So much better, because you made it with love." Caleb gave Clara something he'd been working on for weeks, a custom easel he'd built from reclaimed wood, sturdy and perfectly balanced, with a small brass plate engraved with her initials. "So you have something that's yours," he explained when she ran her fingers over the smooth wood grain. "Built to last." "Caleb, I don't have words. Good thing you have paint instead." She kissed his cheek, quick and impulsive, and they both froze for a moment, the air suddenly charged with something unspoken. Emma, oblivious, was already setting up her new supplies, chattering about what she wanted to paint first. The moment passed, but it left something warm in its wake. January brought bitter cold in the final emancipation hearing. This one was more contentious. Bennett's lawyers arguing that Clara was financially irresponsible, that she'd squandered opportunities, that she needed her father's guidance to avoid ruin. Clara countered with pay stubs from her teaching job, receipts showing careful budgeting, a letter from the gallery confirming her upcoming show. She presented herself as a working artist building a sustainable career, not a wayward daughter running from responsibility. The judge took 3 weeks to rule. 3 weeks where Clara barely slept, where she painted with almost manic energy, where Caleb caught her staring at nothing with fear in her eyes. When the decision came, Sarah called with barely contained triumph in her voice. "Full emancipation granted. All your accounts are yours. Your credit history is separated from his. You're financially independent." Clara sat down hard in the kitchen chair. "It's really over?" "The legal part is. The emotional part might take longer, but yes, Clara, you're free." She called Caleb at work, her voice shaking. "We won. Sarah just called. We won everything." "I'm coming home. You don't have to. I'm already in the truck." He found her in the garage, standing in front of her easel, staring at an unfinished canvas. When she turned to him, her face was a complicated mix of joy and terror and something like grief. "I thought I'd feel different," she said. "More triumphant or relieved or something, but I just feel empty. Like I've been fighting for so long that I don't know what to do now that the war's over." Caleb crossed to her, took her hands. Now you live. That's what you do. You make art and teach classes and figure out who you are when you're not fighting for survival. What if I don't know how? Then you learn. Same as everything else. He squeezed her hands gently. Clara, you've been free for months now.
Legally might have just caught up, but you made the choice to walk away long before any judge signed papers. Don't let your father take credit for the courage that was always yours. She kissed him then, properly this time, and it felt like something clicking into place, like the final piece of a restoration project finding its home. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through tears. I was so scared when I knocked on your door that first night. I know. I never imagined it would lead here. Neither did I, but I'm glad it did. They stood in the garage surrounded by canvases and tools, by evidence of work done and work yet to come, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest. This was right. This strange, unexpected family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances. Emma found them there an hour later, demanded to know if they were going to celebrate, insisted on making a cake even though she'd never successfully baked anything before. This is a special occasion, she declared. Special occasions need cake. The cake was lopsided and overfrosted, but they ate it anyway, laughing at Emma's elaborate decorating that involved way too much food coloring and sprinkles. Clara took a photo of it, said she wanted to remember this moment. The three of them crowded around a messy kitchen table, celebrating freedom with terrible cake and pure joy. The gallery show in March was everything Clara had hoped for and more. She'd finished 17 pieces, a cohesive series she called Emerging that traced her journey from captivity to autonomy through color and form. The opening night was packed, people drawn by the raw honesty of the work. Richard Bennett didn't attend, didn't send flowers or a card or any acknowledgement. His absence was its own kind of statement, and Clara found she didn't care. He'll never understand, she said to Caleb as they stood watching people examine her paintings. And that's okay. I don't need his approval anymore. What do you need? She looked around the gallery, at her work on the walls, at Emma chattering with Sarah Chen in the corner, at the strangers seeing beauty in the story she'd told through paint. Then she looked at Caleb, and her smile was pure and unguarded. This, everything I already have, it's enough. 3 paintings sold that night, 2 more by the end of the week. The money wasn't life-changing, but it was validation, proof that her vision had value beyond just personal catharsis. She used part of the proceeds to pay Caleb back for months of housing and food, despite his protests. You don't owe me anything, he argued. I know. That's why I want to give it, because it's my choice, not an obligation. With the rest, she bought supplies for Emma's dragon costume for the spring festival, contributed to groceries, started a small savings account that was entirely hers. The independence of it, the simple act of managing her own money, felt revolutionary. By late spring, the house on Miller Road had been thoroughly transformed. Clara's paintings hung on walls that had been bare for years. Emma's dragon drawings covered the refrigerator in layers. The garage was split evenly between mechanical restoration and artistic creation. The kitchen table bore the marks of countless meals shared, countless conversations that ran late into the night. One Saturday in May, Caleb finally finished the truck. The bodywork was perfect. The paint gleaming blue in the sunshine, the engine purring with the smooth reliability of careful craftsmanship. He stood back, looking at the completed restoration, and felt his father's presence like a hand on his shoulder. We did it, Dad, he said quietly. Took longer than we planned, but we got there. Clara came out to the garage, found him standing there with suspicion-bright eyes. It's beautiful, she said. Your dad would be proud. I think he'd mostly be annoyed it took me so long. Or he'd understand that some things can't be rushed, that restoration happens at its own pace. Caleb looked at her, at this woman who'd arrived broken and afraid and had rebuilt herself into something strong and whole. Yeah, I think you're right. They took the truck for its first real drive that afternoon, Emma in the middle, Clara by the window, all of them grinning as Caleb navigated the country roads. The engine ran smooth, the restoration complete, the promise to his father finally kept. But as they drove, Caleb realized the truck wasn't the only thing he'd restored. Somewhere in the process of helping Clara find her freedom, he'd found his own, had opened his life to possibility again, had let people in,
had remembered that protecting himself from pain also meant shutting out joy. Emma was singing in the cab, off-key and enthusiastic, while Clara sketched in a notebook balanced on her knee, capturing the blur of scenery and motion. And Caleb drove, one hand on the wheel, and felt utterly, completely at peace. That evening, they sat on the porch watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dark. Emma had finally worn herself out and gone to bed, leaving the two adults to their quiet conversation. "I got offered a residency," Clara said into the comfortable silence. 3 months at an artist colony in Northern California. All expenses paid, studio space, time to just create. Caleb felt his heart clench. "That's amazing. When?" "Next winter, January through March." She turned to look at him. "But I'd have to leave, and I don't know if I want to." "Clara, you have to go. That's an incredible opportunity." "I know, but I finally built something here, something that feels like home. And I'm scared that if I leave, even for 3 months, it'll all disappear." "We're not going anywhere," Caleb said firmly. "Emma and I will be right here when you get back. This house, this life, this family. It's yours for as long as you want it." "You mean that?" "Every word." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder and Caleb wrapped his arm around her, held her close. They'd never defined what they were to each other. More than friends, less than lovers, something that didn't fit into neat categories. But sitting there in the May darkness, with fireflies blinking like promises and the future stretching open before them, Caleb realized it didn't need a label. What they had was enough, more than enough. "I love you," Clara said quietly. "I should probably say that. You and Emma both. You saved my life." "You saved your own life." "We just gave you a safe place to do it." "That's everything, though. Don't you see? The safe place is everything." They sat until the stars came out in full force, until the fireflies faded and the night grew cool. Then they went inside to the small house that had become home to all of them, to the life they'd built from storm and shelter and the simple revolutionary act of opening a door. Years later, when people asked Clara how she became a successful artist, she never told them about her gallery shows or her residencies or the critical acclaim her work eventually received. She told them about a stormy night and a mechanic who let a stranger in, about a 7-year-old girl who taught her what family really meant, about learning that freedom wasn't something granted but something chosen, again and again, every single day. And she'd tell them that home wasn't a place you were born into, but one you built with people brave enough to believe you deserved safety and love and room to grow. The house on Miller Road still stands, weathered but sturdy, filled with laughter and paint-stained floors and the ghosts of 1,000 small kindnesses. In the garage, a blue 1979 Ford F-150 sits beside an easel, evidence of 2 different kinds of restoration. And in the kitchen, 3 mismatched mugs wait by the coffee pot, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. Because that's what homes do. They wait, they shelter, they make space for people to become who they were always meant to be. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they give you the courage to finally turn the handle on a door that was never really locked. You just had to reach.